common sense ain't that common anymore. Seems common sense is past tense, just like the dinosaur. Political correctness has got a lot to answer for, because common sense...
Welcome to Rogue Bogues. This is the Common Sense series. Haven't done one of these in a while, so I thought I'd pump one out. Very special guest today. Guy's pretty well-rounded on numerous issues, not just in Victoria and Australia, but the world. Matt Wong, Discernible. Welcome to Rogue Bogues.
Hey, Bogues. Not that special. Mate, it's an honour to be here. I feel honoured to count you as a friend lately. Some of the scheming we get up to over Signal.
Has to be on the Signal app, though. The self-delete is very important. But
I'm going to sell this stuff to Herald Sun, mate, one day when we stop being friends. I need to make some coin off you somehow.
Well, there's not much to sell because I kind of voice the same opinions on Twitter, so there's not much intrigue left on old Bogues. But for people out there that aren't familiar with who you are, I'll give a bit of background. Discernible is your channel on Instagram, Twitter, or social media platforms. You've relaunched your podcast now, much more professional than Rogue Bogues at the moment. But I caught your videos, I believe it was probably mid-late 2020s. I started seeing Discernible pop up on my Instagram feed, really liked kind of what was coming out. That's kind of how I got to know who you are. I messaged you. I ended up going on Discernible myself when I was in Melbourne for a couple of months. And that's kind of our connection. But break down Discernible. I know you're from Sydney originally. You moved to Melbourne. Why Discernible? How Discernible? Give us all the goss on what your plans are.
Well, you've opened up this conversation saying Matthew Wong. You only hear your full name when you're in trouble from your parents, right?
So or on a professional podcast.
Well, I raise that because I hate my name. I've always hated my name. I find it generic. I mean, Wong, come on. Do you know how many Wongs there are? There's literally a billion of us. 1 point whatever billion of us.
It's very John Smith-ish.
What's John's? Oh, John Smith, yes, for the white boys.
Yeah.
So can we – sorry, I don't know how loose I can be with my language like that.
As loose as you want to be.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I've always hated my name and I just wanted something different. So I found a name, called it Discernible, just to describe what started as business stuff. I'm really passionate about business and come from a long career history, both in the entrepreneurial side, starting running my own businesses, hiring staff and doing that whole thing, selling businesses. And then I went into corporate for a while, worked at places like Yamaha, selling drones and Tesla and places like that. And then, I worked in AI for a while, and I'm sorry to say I was responsible for pushing a lot of the clickbait in newsrooms around Australia. Not the clickbait so much, but we were selling the AI technology that kind of makes feedback loops in clickbait. So I don't know if people realize a lot of social media you see from The Age, The Guardian, the right wing as well, Sky News, and even not just news like Condé Nast and Vogue and Vice, Broadsheet, all of these companies used our technology or a variation of it from our competitors, which would monitor in real time people's responses on social and then sort of build feedback loops and feed back to them what causes the most engagement, which we've now discovered is usually outrage. And so, we were automating newsrooms as much as possible using this kind of technology. So that's kind of a shameful part of my career. I regret that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too proud of that. But someone's got to do it, I guess. But yeah, you do make a fair point because I used to talk to a journalist friend of mine who covers AFL, and I was like, stop with all the wags stories. Like, stop. It's just crap. Like, no, and he's like, they're our best engagement is the wag stories. And I was like, okay, point taken. So,
mate, when you see a wag story pop up in the Daily Mail, there's some hottie in the front on the headline in the picture. I'm a guy, like straight away I'm like, oh, what's that story about? Like that's what they're doing. They're just racing to the bottom of the brainstem.
Yep. No, definitely. It makes sense as far as clicks and engagement, but is it the right kind of people you want clicking and engaging? That's the question. But go on. Discernible.
Yeah. So what am I up to? So look, I quit that place, that AI clickbait type place. That was headquartered in London. I was running APAC, and I resigned because of moral issues. I said, this is wrong and so on. And then I did this and nobody cared about business videos. And then I started to call out the rubbish lies I was seeing in politicians, which I'll put on the record now. It's not just Labor, it's Liberal as well. But I started to call it out in the Labor state government in Victoria because they were in power at the time. And people liked our stuff. So I kept doing it. And it's transformed now into like a Joe Rogan. Like we do long forms.
Yeah. I think that's the best way. I think that's what I'm somewhat trying to do here with numerous series. I think not putting a time slant on things is very, very important because some people can go deep into things. Some people might not want to talk about things, and then you go on to the next subject, whatever it is. And as we spoke about off air, if the podcast goes an hour, it goes an hour. If it goes three, it goes three. And I think they're the best. I think people are engaging more with that now, which is kind of steering away from the clickbait. So it's kind of the anti-clickbait of, what we just spoke about is you have to kind of tune into a Joe Rogan for 2 or 3 hours to get the whole point of what's being spoken about. And it's very hard to clickbait, a podcast that goes that long because I can just be like, hang on a second, you've taken that out of context. You've grabbed 20 seconds of 3 hours. Like, here's the pre and post, and it's on record. So I think it's not the way of the future. It's the way of the now, I think.
Well, you listen to podcasts, yeah?
100%, yeah.
Yeah. So you know what it's like when you're riding a bike or you're in the gym or you're driving your car, whatever you're doing, and you just go deep, the first 10 minutes you're kind of getting into it, but then after a while you're in the room. Like right now there'll be people listening to us in their earphones right now. And you just get into a flow and a lot of what we'll be talking about today is not really, I'm not a very smart guy, but I mean, I'm not stupid, but a lot of stuff I have to say, people say, oh, it's so profound. Yeah, it is because it's all these podcasts I listen to and I'm absorbing both podcasts that I make with people and podcasts that I listen to, whether it be Rogan's or Lex Friedman's or huge, crazy people. And I'm absorbing all of that in their worlds. And I just think this has made me such a better human. I'm such a fan of podcasts.
Exactly. Yeah. And I drive a fair bit. I've done numerous road trips from Queensland to Victoria over the last couple of years for reasons we can discuss at a later date, but just didn't want to get stuck somewhere without a car, if that makes sense, in case that old lockdown leak came on a Sunday night. I was in the car and gone. But yeah, just especially driving for me, I just put it on, tune out, and it's reading a book in your car, really, to me, or on the airplane or on the bus or whatever it is, or even just killing time. Get to appointments 30 minutes early, chuck in some headphones and just tune out for 30 minutes. I think it's pretty cool. I really enjoy them. I know a lot of people do out there. That's kind of why I got involved in them. But for you, Discernible, I mean, I realized it was a big passion project for you once I showed up to your quote-unquote studio the first time, which now...
Mate, at the door, you had a go at me.
Did I?
You got the door. Yeah. When you came in the door, you were like, oh, is this it? I thought you had a professional studio.
I was giving you a bit of shit. It was loosely with a smile on my face. But that's when I knew it was a passion project. I knew you were really passionate about it because for context, you had one of your bedrooms decked out into a studio. Your baby was there at the time, right? Your wife. So I'm like, this guy is really dedicated because I know how hard it is just to do an audio podcast out of a home with 2 children in it because I've been doing it the last 18 months, especially when kids weren't in school at that point yet. You got to get everything quiet. You got to kind of stress about sound, all that kind of stuff. Don't interrupt me. So that's when I got a taste for how passionate you are about it. And you haven't moved on now. You've fitted out I would say an upgrade on that now.
Yeah, mate. We've got a whole property now. We rent it out and we've built 3 studios. So yeah, we're going hard.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, you love to see it, and I think a lot of people that follow your channel have appreciated, the content you've put out. I think just the vast, the variety of people that you've had on. I don't think it's one-sided, in my opinion. Some people probably will think it is, same as they think my guests are one-sided. But I think you're pretty open to business people, to politicians, to controversial people. I think that's the whole point of podcasts. That's the whole point of having this dialogue is having people that you disagree with on. Now, I can't get a lot of people on here that are all in pro Dan fans or all in against kind of my views. I would love to, because I would love to have that.
Why won't they come on?
Because I'm seen as the fascist side of whatever their brain is on the day. It's just that label of like, oh, you're anti this, you're anti, anti-health, you want to kill granny, or that's just an example when you go down to the COVID stuff with Dan. But it's I'd love to have people that disagree with me, and I think it's important to have those discussions as an adult. Like, it doesn't need to be abusive, it doesn't need to be anything that's hurting each other. But I think having those conversations are important. And just to relay the point of where I'm going with this is why I liked Discernible, and I thought it had some of those conversations where I might not have agreed with everything, but it kind of triggered something like, oh, maybe that's a different point of view I haven't seen, rather than just like, you can't say that because it's opposite to the narrative that we're pushing out by the media or the government. And if we can't have that in society, I think we're in big trouble, right?
Yeah, there is one bias. I'm just scrolling through my interview list because people say, oh, you've always got political people on. It's literally less than 50% of political. A lot of them are various sort of scientists or singer-songwriters or whatever, economists. But I have noticed a theme, and that is that everyone on my podcast seems to be speaking against the government narratives. And I think that's just a reality of I'm open to anyone having on. I'd love to have. I've invited PR Guy 17 multiple times. I've invited Daniel Andrews on. I had one of my staff members literally email every single politician in Australia. So they all have an invite to come on Discernible, and so that's left wing, that's Greens, that's Labor, and the reality is they don't want to come on, and it's PR Guy might have his reasons to not come on, fine, and then a Greens member might have the reasons to not come on, fine. But you start to notice a pattern over time, and is that the libs or more right-wing leaning type of people or more anti-government narrative people like the LDP party and Limerick and so on, they'll come on. And the people who have something to lose because they're invested into a government narrative, they won't come on. So I guess there is that kind of sway throughout my guest list.
But would you also think that I guess Labor's just they're so in with mainstream media for the most part in Victoria at least.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
So do they not bother going on the small fry, Discernible, Rogue Bogues? Because why would we need to do that? We have the voice of the people through all the major mainstream media, TV channels, newspapers. Whereas Limbricks and so on have a smaller footprint, and they're like, any media is good media. So it could be that mentality as well, I think.
Yeah, not just size though, because I actually have had big federal Labor MPs and some Greens MPs from up your way in Queensland agree to come on. And I'm like, great, I'll have them on. I'll let them talk about climate change and I'll make them look as good as possible. Like, we don't smear people on the show. So I've had vegans on saying how good veganism is on the show, and we'll push it. Then I've had carnivorous people on saying veganism's rubbish, and we'll push it. Like, I'm open. I want people to make up their own minds. But the Greens people that I just talked about and the federal Labor pollies, they say yes. And then when we start to organise the interview, they say—
They bail.
Well, they don't bail. They say, like I said to you before this interview, I said, what topics do you want to talk about? Just so I can get ready with some facts in case I need to refer to them. But I wasn't trying to control the interview. But these guys, they say to me, look, we want the ability to edit the interview. So you record the long form, but then you give it to us and we will give you what you're allowed to publish.
Yeah, it defeats the purpose.
That's ridiculous. Yeah. And another one said, oh, yeah, that's fine. We can interview, but we want to veto over any part of the interview that we tell you to delete out of the long form. You have to delete it. And I said, well, like, we can have a discussion. Like, if you pick your nose on camera or something you want to delete, like, that's fine. But we haven't actually had to do that, coincidentally. But they're talking about like total editorial control over the message. I'm like, what are we, like a Labor Party campaign office? So this always comes from one side of issues. It never comes from the other side. The more freedom-loving people say, no, just whatever, ask me whatever you want.
And it makes you think what's going on with these mainstream interviews, So it's obviously happening there because they're just so trained to do it with any media. Hey, we want editing rights, we want this, we want that. I'll take that out. Where it's the mainstream media knows, or we'll scratch their back, they'll scratch ours. And it's, the more you dig into it, it's a deep rabbit hole. But there is a massive relationship between government and mainstream media, and that's how it works. And I've done similar things as a professional athlete. Like, I've done interviews where I've said some controversial things, and they'll come up to me after and be like, "Hey, do you want to edit that out? It's a bit," I'm like, "Nah, they're my thoughts." Like, I'm not gonna, I don't shy away from it. One of the few in the spotlight that doesn't. But I was kind of like, look, I appreciate it, but then I thought like, shit, so they must do this for a lot of people that, you know, this isn't this, our listeners or our followers weren't exactly like that line. Let's take that out. And like, no, but
yep. But this is how I came across you, man. So you did, what is it called? The Silence is Deafening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, people, your listeners would know what that is, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, that was that one around, basically around that I was, you know, offered money to do a pro government rant about stay at home and all that. And I, similar to the reason you resigned from your last job, I morally could not put out a PSA to tell people to stay at home and not go to work when I was in a beautiful home with a fridge full of food and no mortgage. Like, I'm like, it's so hypocritical.
Damn, you live in the dream. Fridge full of food, no mortgage. I love it.
100% these days. That's the elite these days. Where the world's going, if you've got a fridge full of food and no mortgage, you know, you're a 1%er at this point with the way the world's going. But that's Discernible. I mean, yeah, check it out. I think people that are familiar with you know the work you do. I think it's growing rapidly, which is great. We're competing with Rogue Bogues. So we'll see who wins the race at the end of the day. But let's move on. I want to start off with one of our first topics. I mean, it's the elephant in the room. I'm a Victorian. I'm in and out of the state. I'm in Queensland at the moment. Looking like we're going to probably stay in Queensland for the time being with everything going on. And you're a Sydney boy that's in Victoria. I mean, it is a massive elephant in the room. You moved from Sydney, albeit at the wrong time. Were you 19, 20 when you moved?
No,
2019,
sorry.
Sorry, 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you moved definitely at the wrong time. you got thrown right into the swamp. But look, I'm not sure which part it was of yours, but you mentioned something that kind of I've always spoken about. Australia is a nanny country, right? We know it is. People genuinely fall in line, or generally fall in line with government, with directive, with whether it makes sense or not. They'll fall in line, and then, you know, we've seen it with COVID. Maybe a year or two in, they'll be like, "Hang on a second, this doesn't really make sense. I might go my own tack." But we're a pretty abiding people, right? But Victoria, I think, is another level. And I can't remember, you'd have to correct me which podcast it was you were talking about this, but you were saying how you felt like Victoria seems like another level of nanny state above the rest of the country. And it 100% is. And I've experienced this from being in the car scene, the muscle car scene and whatnot, and it's a small sample size, but interactions with police and friends of mine that have nice cars, just constantly hassled and constantly, you know, it's like police are out there. There's keeping the community safe, and then there's going well and above, you know, just being an annoyance to people. And I think, you know, the interactions I've had with Victoria Police, a good mate of mine's a copper actually, and he's a very, very nice guy. But for the most part, there's a different kind of presence and personality of Victoria Police, and just, I don't know. You touched on it, and I totally was like listening to it in the car, and I'm like, man, that's so bang on. And it goes to everything. It goes to, you know, government officials. It goes to health officials. It goes to why is Victoria like that? Why are they on steroids with the nanny state?
Okay, so if you think about people who come back, they leave Australia for 20 years and they come back, or they're immigrant, they're like raised in the UK and then they come here at 25, 30. They all say to us, "Wow, you guys are such a nanny state." And having grown up in Australia, both of us, right? We're like, okay, I guess so. But we had to learn that because we just knew this is life. Like, this is what the government does. This is what the RTA does. This is it. And it takes an outsider to see it. And so I'm an outsider in Victoria. You know, I'm from Sydney, and I can see that, you know, police and government are just a reflection of the people. And in Victoria, that's very much the case. What you've described, the police, and I would argue a lot more than the police down here, are just a reflection of the culture of this state. And, you know, the best way to explain it will probably be something that's quite simple, that's nothing to do with police, and that is your everyday infrastructure. So if you look at the way trains are done down in Victoria, if you look at the way fire hydrants are done in Victoria compared to Sydney, if you look at the way lines and bus lanes and bus zones, bus stops on the side of the road are built, if you look at the way traffic signs, I think just traffic in general, the roads and infrastructures tells you a lot about the difference between Victoria and Sydney. I find that in Victoria, there is a nanny state right down to those very levels, right down to you must stand here, not there. You must drive here, not there. And people tend to, in Victoria, have been kind of herded like sheep into behaving a certain way when authority tells you. And it's funny because Victoria is not angry. Victoria's one of the reasons we chose to move Victoria. It's a very loving kind of state. Like we care about people, we care about the environment. We've got a beautiful geographic location here in Australia, which I think is far superior to the sauna you're living in Queensland. But they really are well-intentioned. But as we've seen during the COVID 2 years, that well-intentionedness turns into the worst of all of Australia. The worst Karens, the worst social prosecutors have been in Melbourne. And that's reflected in the police. The police force saying if you see too many cars outside your neighbour's house, you need to call the police assistance line and report them because they might be breaking lockdown restrictions. Or when they scream at my kid, my 2-year-old and 4-year-old on the swing in the residential park with no one at the park, and a neighbor, she just throws the neighbor relationship out the window and decides to scream at the kid and to myself saying, "You're spreading the virus and I'm going to call Victoria Police." That is likely in a state where people have been taught to follow the rules and we need authority structures for people's good, like they really believe it in Victoria. They really believe, you've got PR Guy 17 at the moment going on about masks. He's a bit of an exception, I guess, but a lot of people here are well-meaning. The C.S. Lewis phenomenon. He says that it's better to live under robber barons than moral busybodies, because a moral busybody, just to summarize his quote real short, he says, look, they do it with a sense of a clear conscience. They're persecuting you for your own good, so their persecution is without end. And I think that's what Victoria is. I think it's a kinder state, and because of that, it's a meaner state, if that makes sense.
Interesting take, yeah. I mean, look, I don't think this is an issue I think it's arisen during COVID on steroids because COVID's kind of pushed everything along so quickly, but I think this has always been an issue. I think it's definitely the gold standard of self-policing. I know Dan Andrews loves to use the gold standard, so we're going to use that language. But like you said, neighbours dobbing on neighbours. And I've used this example before. I don't know if I gave it on your podcast or wherever I did, but I reflect back to when I was a child and the water restrictions were on, and I was, how old was I, 16? It was 99, 2000, somewhere around there. And I remember, my dad would come home at 5:30 at night. We'd watch the channel, I think it was Channel 7 News, and then Today Tonight would be on in the background as we're finishing dinner. And it was all about water restrictions. And I don't know if you remember, but they put in, at least in Victoria they put in, there was times you could water your garden. So it was that. And you look back now at the COVID restrictions and you're like, how do people follow this so blindly where they don't even question it? There's a start. This was 20, 30 years ago. So it was like you could water your garden from, I think it was like 7 till 9 a.m. and 5 till 7 p.m., let's say, right? And I remember my mum, God bless her, like she's so indoctrinated by the mainstream media was the neighbour's watering his garden, it's 3:30. I'm going to call the police or the council and report him. I said, why? Why? Number one, why is it bothering you? Number two, what's the difference? Maybe he works night shift. Maybe he leaves home at 5 p.m. and it's your neighbor, right? And I'm not saying this as a knock on my mum, but my mum thought she was doing the right thing. My mum thought she was like a noble citizen by, I'm going to call the council and report my neighbor for watering his garden outside of times. And we've just been it's so normalized. That's normal. No, that's normal here. Like you got to, like you said, you're standing on the wrong part of the footpath. That's a fine. We're going to fine you for that. And that's where I bring up the interactions. I've lived in Australia now. I've lived in New South Wales for 2 or 3 years. I've lived in Queensland for a year, and I've lived in Victoria. Even just interactions with VicPol are different to Queensland and to New South Wales. It's kind of, I felt like in Queensland or New South Wales, when I've been pulled over for doing the wrong thing or had a talking to by a police officer, it's kind of like, hey mate, you fucked up. Here's your fine. Like, don't do it again. Put your head in. Kind of that kind of attitude. Whereas like, it's really intimidating in Victoria. Like even the way they walk up to the car at times, it's like, I'm a police officer. You must bow down to me. What do you think you're doing? And you're like, yeah, I made a mistake. Like, can we get on with life? And that's very, very noticeable. And that's why I brought up that point. And I'm just like, man, it really isn't. And then, okay, maybe to your point, the nicest people become then the most stringent on rules. I think this has been an issue in Victoria for a long, long time now. You can argue Queensland, people label Bogans, they don't really care, a bit looser. Is that a bad thing? You know what I mean? At times, I kind of, I always had that stigma about Queensland till I spent a lot of time up here the last year or two, and at least the people, they let you go about your business. They're like, you know what, do what you got to do. I'm a bit rough around the edges. Good morning. And that's kind of the interaction. Whereas I just felt I could really notice a difference living in different states in Australia.
Well, you got to look at the motivation, mate. So if, your water restriction example, if your mum or whoever, sorry to Bogues' mum, but if your mum is wanting to dob in someone next door, if she was saying, I want to dob him in because I value our water, we're in the middle of a drought and I don't want her to waste too much water, we all need to be in this together and whatever, I may disagree with that, but I can respect that. She's rationally saying, I don't want you to waste water, so let's follow the restrictions. But I suspect, I know that people don't do, that's not what we've been hearing, right, throughout COVID and even 30 years ago. It was not, the government said, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. and you're doing it at 2:30. The government said you're doing it outside the times. And so they find their morality in an arbitrary law, which we've just discovered governments are full of shit. They literally are going back on all of their COVID policies right now. They're rubbish. They're morally bankrupt politicians in this country. So to base your morality as a citizen of any state in this country because they said so, that's what I really have a problem with. You're not thinking, Australia.
That, and arguing my mum's point, it wouldn't have been, what you first said. It would also have been, if I can't do it, why should they? That's what it comes down to a lot of times. So the rule could be the dumbest rule in the world, but I follow that rule because it's the government, and everyone else should. The example I have is in Australia is people that drive in the right lane at 99 kilometers an hour in a 100 zone, right? And you go to other parts of the world and it's a common courtesy that, hey, if the guy behind me or the girl behind me wants to speed, so be it. I'm going to move out of the way. Maybe they're in a rush. I don't know what they got going on that day. But I'm going to move out of the way. Whether I'm going 100 exactly or 105, I'm going to move out of the way. People here will try to say, well, that's illegal. That's speeding. And in Australia, it's the mentality of like, I'm doing 99. I'm just under the speed limit. I'm doing the right thing. They shouldn't speed anyway. And it's like, I get that, but you go to other countries in the world, there's a common courtesy there. You know what I mean? And it comes back to that whole thing of like the citizens police the citizens. That's where we've become, and it's kind of dystopian at times when you really think about it and break it down. That's a win for the government because the government doesn't have to employ more police or more officials or more parking officers because you got Joe Blow abusing, Jill for leaving her car in the wrong spot or whatever. And that's not a great place, a happy place society-wise, in my opinion.
Yeah, so this is crabs in a bucket, right? Crabs won't climb out of a bucket if there's multiple crabs because the other crabs pull him down. And that's exactly, just to sort of sum up what we're saying, right? With Victoria, what it is, the why it's so stringent is because they feel like they're crabs in a bucket, yes, but they feel like they're noble and they're doing it for the right reason. So let me give you one example of cars, right? I go to buy a secondhand car a few months ago, just like a $9,000 car, cheap, from Dandenong's cheapest cars. Can't believe it. Anyway.
Hometown, baby.
There. Yeah, mate. I think it's actually called Dandenong's cheapest
probably
cars
is.
Or something.
It's probably not even in Dandenong, knowing because a lot of those businesses have names that they're no longer in that city.
It's pretty cheesy. But anyway, so I buy this car and I'm having this argument with this guy. This guy's like he's a great guy. He's pretty honest, but he's arguing like hates what Daniel Andrews has done, hates the Karen mentality, doesn't follow any of the lockdown rules, all this kind of stuff, right? And then I said to him, okay, this is interesting that you're that type of person. So let me test something. So I said, what's the deal with roadworthy certificates in Victoria? Like, I don't understand why it's so expensive for a roadworthy, why the seller has to get it, and why it takes if it took a day or whatever, like in New South Wales, you go and get your green slip. It's an e-safety check, they call it now, right? It's what, $20, or I haven't done one for a while, and they do it on the spot. Here, the guy goes, oh, it'll take you 3 to 4 weeks to get in. I'm like, what? I said, is this COVID? What's the normal delay? He says, no, usually about 2 weeks. I'm saying, mate, why a roadworthy so stringent in Victoria, so expensive and takes so long? And it turns out that the Victorian government has decided to make to protect used car buyers. They want the quality of cars, used cars, to be higher. So this dealer, who's like all anti-government, right? He's saying to me, no, he loves the regulation in the state because we have the best cars in the nation, because our standards are so high on the roadworthies that any kind of red tape is worth it in this case because we have the best cars. And so that's just an example of how someone who's pretty anti-regulation, this guy, can love regulation when he feels like it's for the good.
When it suits him, yeah. Yeah, and when it suits his business and suits what he's doing. Yeah.
Good point. But that attitude's everyone, Victoria. Like if we all think we're doing the right thing, do the right thing, you know?
Oh, the amount of people that, well, I would say 100% of people have flattered or cheated COVID restrictions at some point over the last 2 years, right? But they'll also be the same people that if they're on the spot, on camera, on microphone, where they'll shun someone else for doing it. And you're like, are you telling me you have not, you know what I'm saying? Are you telling me you have not shunned one of these restrictions, been out at 9:01 p.m. or gone 5.5 kilometers? Like, you're kidding yourself. And everyone's done it. Let's not lie. Everyone was flattening them. It could have been you just forgot to wear your face mask going into a servo one day or whatever it was. Everyone's broken the rules, but it's more that pompous attitude of like, oh, but I'm still going to police other people for it when I'm doing it right, you know? And I mean, a final example of the COVID shenanigans I had was I had a mate of mine during the 1 hour exercise mandate the Victorian government implemented, where you had 1 hour of outside time. He had the dog has recently passed away, but a massive kind of Malamute dog, right? And he had a newborn baby. So simple maths is you can't walk both of them at the same time. He's got a pram and then got that big ass dog that's pulling him the other way. So he's like, you know, it's safer for me to do one at a time. So he walks his Malamute, comes back home, puts the dog away, gets the pram out, you know, puts a little one in. Neighbor comes out and goes, "You've already had your walk today," and he's like, "Are you fucking serious?"
Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
You've had your walk.
You've had your walk today.
You've had your walk. What the?
Exactly. And he's like, "Yeah, but I've got to." He goes, "I was starting to explain myself to her," and then I was like, "Fuck off!" He caught himself like, "Why am I even explaining myself to my neighbor that I've got a big dog and I didn't want my baby, I didn't want the pram to, you know, get pulled this way and whatever." And he's like, "No," he's like, and just kept walking. But that goes to my point. It was just like there was people looking out their windows because the government told them to about, you know, timing people's walks. Like, "Oh, mate, 61 minutes, you better get back inside," you know. And just a small example of how it wasn't. And look, it's not just Victoria. That there were other people in other states that were kind of that hardcore that were scared into doing that. But I think Victoria, you know, I was stuck there in the last lockdown, and it was brutal, man. It was that was when the tape was around the playgrounds. I remember my son asking like, "Why is that playground broken, Daddy?" And I'm just like, man, like, how do I explain this to a kid? Like, my wife was a genius with this. I got to give her credit. At the start of all this, she was like, we're not using the word COVID. We're not using the word mask. None of that around the kids. So that they have no idea that there's even a coronavirus, which has been pretty hard to do. Like, because all the kids talk about it, you know, it's been spoken about at school. One of them started school this year in prep. But we did a pretty good job of they had no idea, like, and they'd ask like, why are all these people wearing masks? Who knows? You know, it's fashion, something like that. You know, we just didn't want to discuss it with them because we don't want to instill that fear into them. Like, you know, they're 3-5 years old. Like, go and get dirty, go fall off a trampoline, you know, scuff your elbow up, your knees. Like, I'm kind of that mentality. And I saw a lot of friends and family that were the opposite, you know, and it's their decision, of course, but it's hard to see.
It's more than parenting styles, Matt. I know you want to talk about this later, but it's for a state, Victoria, that is so anti-religious, like secularism rules the day. We're going to pass a bunch of what do they call it? I can't remember the laws against Christians doing something.
The conversion bills.
That's right. Yeah. And we're going to stand up for LGBTIQ community. We're going to build centers, blah, blah, blah. Mate, this is the most religious state I've ever seen. It's just that they don't call it religion. It's this kind of unthinking, irrational dedication to certain things. Right now it's the science, but, you know, before it was something else. This place, whereas you just said it, like Queensland, they're not particularly zealous. They're like, yeah, I'll get on with my life.
100%. I mean, we can get into that. I mean, definitely wanted to touch on around this out, but yeah, the religion things, it's spot on. It's so blatant that people are worshipping politicians and chief health officers and whatnot. I mean, they had Brett Sutton on pillows, mate, that they were selling and T-shirts. At one point.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? Yeah, they actually had him embroidered on pillows.
Fauci had that. Oh, okay.
They had it here too. I saw it. I think it was late 20. They're worshipping these people as gods. The same way people these same people will laugh and not, oh, your God's not real. This that. You're literally bowing down to a politician, and it just boggles my mind. And you can't really explain the hypocrisy of it to people. But we'll round out the rest of this. I mean, I guess you've followed TAC the last couple of weeks. Mask recommendations are no longer mandates, Matt. They are encouraged.
The Victorian government has rejected the health advice of the chief health officer.
They have. What's the deal there? They've just finally come to their senses, have they, Matt? Is that what it is, or is there something looming in November that we should know about?
I don't know what's going in November. Look, I've got to defer to Voice for Victoria, who's been calling this out the entire way. An account on Instagram dedicated to putting the rubbish of Victoria out there. Look, they've never been following the science. They've never been following science. It's all been political. We've all known it, but now finally, even the most ardent people who have been saying yes, it's a science, have to admit it's not, because those people now, like Professor Karen Phelps in New South Wales, I think she lives. She was the head of the AMA for a while. She's now saying, "Hey, Albo, I see you're getting your 15th booster, great, but where is your N95 mask?" And
I saw that. I saw that.
What? They're turning on themselves. They're eating themselves. And look, but they have to admit, come on, there's something wrong here, because it was all about, we can't show you the health advice while we close playgrounds, but the chief health officer thinks it's the right thing to do, so they close
one case, remember? Yep.
And now, and then 3 days later, or whatever, 10 days later, after we all kicked up a stink, it's like, oh no, we think it's okay. And so they open the playgrounds. All right. Okay. So science change. And now they're saying we're rejecting the chief health officer's advice because businesses are complaining. So look, it's just if you're still saying governments are only doing this for your good and they're only following the best advice that they receive, you're lying to yourself, mate.
100% agree. And that's the challenge I have with trying to, when you have these debates with people about, people that are all in for mask mandates and vax mandates and all this kind of stuff, and I'm kind of the opposite, where I'm kind of like, no, I think if you want to do it, do it. If you don't, I think we should get on with life. Is trying to just get them to see that light of just like, hang on a second now. Like, can you now at least admit that this is political more than it is anything to do with health? And people are starting to get in the middle of like, oh yeah, okay, I do. And I guess there's a hashtag out there, I stood with Dan, which I was alerted to yesterday. There's a lot of people losing their shit now at Dan that were all in on the extreme mandates that he's not pushing anymore, and now turning on him as well.
What, saying they want the mandates to return?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that were all in for the handling of the Victorian government was perfect. It was for our health. Now that there's, how many cases is there? 10, 15,000 cases, whatever there is a day or whatever. Yep. There's new variants, and now there's no mandates. It's just recommendations. Now those ardent all-in cultists are losing their shit, saying, I stood with Dan no longer. That's the new hashtag is I stood with Dan. What the hell's going on? Why isn't he protecting me anymore? It's just like, you couldn't write it in a Hollywood script. And it's, I mean, my messaging for people out there is do what you got to do. If you feel like you need the protection of a mask, I got no problem if you wear it. Social distance, do it. It's your decision. That's what I've been pushing from day one. I think as soon as the government implements this kind of stuff, but like we've said, this I guess this topic is long-winded, is you stand over there. We're doing this for your safety. We're protecting you from you. And that's kind of what I feel is kind of the underlying factor in Victoria, is it was so over-legislated, everything's so OH&S, is we're protecting you from you because you're too stupid to protect yourself. And we've gone too far in that hole now. It's harder for us to climb out.
You've summed it up nicely, mate. When you say you're too stupid to protect yourselves, we'll do it for you. Hey, just to close off this bit, I think we just can't forget. I think you all need to go check out this Instagram account. I don't know who runs it, but it's called The Broken Victorian.
Oh, I've got it on my list, man. I've got it on my list. Yep, it is.
Yeah, man. Good account.
It is a sensational account. I'll give people some examples. I've got it uploaded here. You read my mind. You don't even have it on the run sheet, but the exact one is The Broken Victorian on Instagram. These are some of the gems. Okay. So they basically just have slides that just have text. That's it. Nothing else. They do. I've reposted a bunch of them on my Insta, and I've got people saying, man, you're bringing out some PTSD in me, man. Stop it. So here we go. Remember when you could go shopping at Bunnings, but you couldn't go to church? That was from Helena.
Yeah.
I remember my husband being pulled over by the police for breaking curfew when we drove to hospital for my new baby girl's birth. Thank God I was in the middle of a contraction, or we would have been detained or fined. That was from OT. Remember when Dan Andrews claimed that lockdowns and rules were based on science, but refused to release the science? That was from Richard. Remember when I got fired from my full-time work from being home IT job for not being fully vaccinated because of safety? That was from Philip. But the list goes on. These are absolute gems. Glad you shouted that out, because if I was the opposition, I would just post this all day. Like, it can't be any worse than what they're currently doing. Don't get me started on the opposition in Victoria. But if I was an opposing party, this is all you need. This is all you need to bring up that PTSD in people. Like, oh shit! If I vote for this guy, these slides are. This is exactly what happened over the last 18 months. I would just be posting this nonstop. But great page.
I really like the short ones, like from Richard. Remember when lockdowns worked so well that we had 8?
Here's another one. Remember when Dan Andrews banned helicopters from recording protests? That was from Frank.
Yeah.
I urge everyone to go on. If you don't want PTSD, don't go on. But they have some gems. And when you look back at reading these slides from start to finish, he's got 100. There's 149 posts. There's not too many. You wouldn't believe this. You're like, nah, that can't be right. If these slides were done in 2018, you're like, this is what a government did. People would be like, no. Even looking back now, I read some of these and I'm like, holy shit, they really did that. I actually forgot about some of them. And you're just like, what? That's how much of a bubble we were in, how dystopian times were. So a very, very good reminder of what has happened. It's somewhat a nice little scrapbook for Dan Andrews' legacy.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love these. Sorry, I was a bit distracted because I'm reading them now. They're so amazing.
If you got them, you read them
when
out.
they say, remember when you needed paperwork to leave your house before 6 a.m.? And I'm like, holy cow, we did. I can't believe it. Yeah. What? Or I needed some shoes at the time. My shoes were dying. And this one says, remember when we were locked out of retail and clothes were not considered essential? Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. And in New South Wales, there was that guy who, in the media, the police were saying, if you're buying shoes, that's not essential, and we might have to check your bags. Oh no, they were checking people's bags out of Kmart, Target, and Foot Locker and all that, and checking what you were buying, and then saying, why do you need a new pair of shoes? Are these essential? If you had a fresh pair of shoes on, a nice pair of shoes, buying another pair of shoes, you win some shit. You have to scuff them up a little bit. Like, no, look, they're breaking. They're breaking. The paperwork to leave home was hilarious. So I go to one of my friends' cafes. I get there and it was like, I usually get there after the rush hour, after 9 o'clock, sometimes just get a coffee because I know he's not busy then. And he's filling in paperwork. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm signing my paperwork so I can go, I can leave home. And I'm like, what do you mean? Why are you doing it? He goes, I'm the boss of the cafe. So he's filling in his own paperwork saying, I've got an exemption to be, because he's basically 24 hours because he has to get to the cafe early and prep and get all the produce and all that kind of stuff. But he's writing his own paperwork. That's how stupid it was. He's writing his own paperwork and signing it as the owner of the business for himself to travel to and from the cafe out of hours. He's just like, where the hell are we living? What about the other beauties that came up back then was the hotel quarantine. Remember when the door opened and they thought that the wind from the door pushed the virus from one room to another? Right. There was that. Wasn't there nebulizer, man?
The nebulizer was the other one I was getting to, yep. So just think about how stupid this all sounds, people. Like how stupid this all sounds. That these were actual excuses. That the delivery truck driver that came from Queensland, remember him? All over the news.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
He did a whole lockdown. He blamed it on the removalists.
The removalists, yeah. The removalist drivers that came up from up north somewhere, or maybe New South Wales, I could be wrong, but they came up from north somewhere. Whole lockdown based on them. These poor guys' faces were all over. People were abusing them. They're on a current affair and news programs, like just despicable stuff. Like just as humanity itself, you're just like, how are we doing this? Like, and now we're at 15,000 cases, and no one blinks an eyelid to an extent, right?
Are we turning everyone off this podcast as we just go on about how bad Victoria is?
Oh, it's good. It's good to relive. Let's move on. All right. Sport. I want to talk a little bit about the sport and politics, which will somewhat get to Victoria again. But there is, for people out there, there is a direct correlation between sport and politics, and we see it probably with major corporations as well throughout this pandemic, specifically in Victoria. People wonder why there were a lot of these athletes pushing these messages, a lot of sporting clubs. They have to, people. So the AFL and the Gov are so in bed with each other, especially financially. The AFL relies on the government, especially in Victoria, for a lot of their funding. Think stadiums, think XYZ, think sporting facilities. Remember, they're tax exempt if they spend their profits. I don't know if you know this, but if they spend their profits basically on their facilities and blah blah blah, they get to keep that they don't pay tax on those profits, right?
No way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, like a normal business, you just spend. Yeah, you pay tax on profits, is it not revenue?
Exactly, but essentially yes, but that's why every coach has the newest laptop every 3 months and an iPad, and they've got every bit of GPS data. So they're just constantly they don't essentially pay tax in Victoria, right? And the government tries to incentivize them, building new facilities and all that kind of stuff. That's why AFL clubs will build a new facility every 6 years. You know what I mean? Because they just got profits. Like, holy shit, what do we do with this? We need to get rid of this. Let's just spend it and let's just build a new facility. Do you need a new facility? You just built one 6 years ago. But that's why I guess my point with all this was it intersects directly. And we saw that with the AFL and the NRL. The AFL got tips on lockdowns. I don't know if you remember that. So two or 3 days before a major lockdown, they were on a flight out to Queensland. A similar thing was happening with the NRL in Sydney. And there were a lot of people that were like, I idolize these athletes. Why are they not fighting for me? Why are they not, calling out the BS? Why are the actual clubs or the league not? We're the little guy that supports them. We pay the $50 and pay the ticket. They couldn't, because the government's like, hey, we're doing you these favors. You guys are going to somewhat function unencumbered to perform. And the kicker with all this, Matt, is sport needed to go on. It had to go on. Can you imagine if sport stopped, what would have happened with all these restrictions? I mean, I think it would have been as close to a revolution in Australia as you can get, because I really believe that a lot of the Australian mentality and culture is, if I've got a beer full of fridge and I can watch my footy team on the weekend, all is all right in the world. And that's not, it's not 100% of the people, but it's a pretty decent size percentage of people. And I think the government, to an extent, knew we need sport to go on, because you could already, when there were kind of game cancellations and that, it was getting a bit more testy out there. Things were getting a bit more kind of aggro. I really think there's a correlation there. I don't know what your thoughts are.
If so there's a show I do called The People's Project, which is designed to be a better version of Channel 10's Rubbish Show, right? And in last week's episode, we talked about sport. People kind of make fun of what you just talked about. Oh, Aussies and their beer and sport. If you shut down bottle shops and sport, then there'd be riots. And I had Tom McDonald on from Melbourne Football Club, and we're talking about the psychological benefits of sport. Psychologists have long said that it's a good outlet, because we see correlation between rolling out sport in gang areas in the US and then lowered gang crime and so on. So they've investigated this, and they find that sport is not just some kind of fun thing to do, but it's actually an outlet for a natural human need to express conflict and war. So when you see the tribalism of patriotism and nationalism in wartime, you see the similar thing in sports, right? When someone's fighting, your team wins. You got a whole bunch of psychological phenomenon going on around sport that looks similar to conflict. But the thing about sport is it's without the devastation of real fighting, real conflict, and real war, unless you're in South America and your soccer team screws up or something like that. Right? But generally speaking, sport is a safe outlet for not just aggression, for little boys to get their aggression out. No. It's actually a human need to have tribalism, teams, battles. And so I'm with the politicians on this. Like, you have to prioritize sport. I think they should be consistent and let us all out. But I understand why they prioritize sport. Because yes, if you cancelled sport and alcohol in this country, then everyone would have rioted, and for very strong sociological and biological reasons.
Yeah, I agree. Sport has to go on for those reasons. My point was the hypocrisy of, you weren't letting people go to work. Like, a guy that has a Jim's mowing franchise that mows 5 acres of lawn couldn't go to work because of the virus. yet we had a plane full of AFL players, and this is not knocking players. I mean, if I was a player at the time and you were allowed to play, so be it, is they could get on a plane, fly into state, stay in another hotel, go to a stadium, be in contact with another team of football players, umpires, officials, all that kind of stuff, and somewhat be unencumbered because of a big bad virus that has shut the world down. That's more my point as to why they were allowed to go on. I agree. I think sport needs to go on. I think for me, I'm not going to lie. Like, who knows what I would have been doing without sport? It definitely gave me an outlet for all the things that sucked in my life at the time. I wasn't a great student. I wasn't the worst. I was kind of always a BC average guy. Like, I just didn't really apply myself too much to school. I applied it to sport, and I agree with you. You need that, and that's why junior sport's very important as well. But it was more the hypocrisy of it, and touching on into even corporations. We now, people wonder why, you go into mandates and the vaccine mandates. Why does Qantas still have their vaccine mandate, which they're going to scrap?
They've dropped it. Yeah.
It's today, right? Is it? Or I think it was this week.
Sometime, yeah.
But to my point, it was scrapped a while ago by the feds and whatever, right? Why did they keep it on? And then you look at how much government funding they've got over the last 3 or 4 years from ScoMo and whatnot. So companies that are very in tune with government, that need government funding, that need government ins could even be something as simple as a building company that's building all the government projects. The government can say, you need to mandate all your employees. You have to do it because we're giving you these government contracts. They have to do it. So when people think, why is this company doing that? It doesn't make sense. An outdoor building site to mandate, or Qantas, when the rest of when the country, every other airline doesn't have it, that's why. Because you can bet your bottom dollar the government said, here's some more money. I know you're struggling, Qantas, but we want you to push these kind of directives that our government likes. And it's tit for tat, and that's the harsh reality. It's not necessarily always for your health or always for the betterment of the old person flying on Qantas. It's the government's told us to do this, we've got to do it.
Yeah, as a gold card carrying Qantas frequent flyer member, screw you, Joyce. You treat your staff like rubbish. You just take these big handouts from the government, and they didn't even take any equity in Qantas. The government just bailed them out.
Mind-blowing. How did they not take equity? How did they not nationalise the airline?
I don't know how many billions they got out of the government. That's disgusting. And then he treats staff and he treats his fare-paying customers like rubbish. What a stupid little leprechaun. I hate him.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I was a huge fan of Qantas. I worked with them in a sponsorship capacity many, many years ago. Enjoyed it. I've seen the decline of Qantas, and I hope it gets back to where it was. But how about blaming the customers? Once lockdowns lift, that was all time. He's like, customers aren't used to taking their laptops out of their bags and making it a speedy, efficient process through security. That's why it's delayed. And it's like, I went through the Sydney airport at that time, and it was a shit show. It was nothing to do with customers. It was, you had no staff. You had absolutely no staff, and everyone had left. People that you'd mandated had got other jobs, and you're like, oh, hang on a second, we might need some of these people that are doing the hard yards, moving people's luggage around, and where are we going to get them from? So I agree, but it's just a point for me was, you go from sport to government and government to corporations, and people think why are they so quiet? They somewhat have to be, and I don't knock athletes that have kind of kept quiet with this, because knowing the pushback that I've received for speaking out, if I was in the prime of my career and it really affected things, would I have been voicing the same thing? Who knows? I can't be a hypocrite and say, if I was a first-year NBA player and I had to toe the line, I mean, I can't probably argue with saying that I probably would have, right? Because my livelihood was at stake. I was in a very unique, fortunate position where I didn't have to pick and choose, and I felt like I was very lucky to be in that position, and that's why I voiced my opinion even more, because I was like, there's only so much I can do to me. I'm pretty set financially, pretty set work-wise. I don't need your dollar, so I can voice my concerns. But I felt so bad. I had so many players, not only in the NBA, NBL players, AFL players, NRL players, messaging me like, can you help me, man? Like, I don't agree with the mandates. I don't agree with this. I don't agree with that. What can I? And eventually they just succumbed. And it was, hard stories to hear, because I know a lot of those guys in their soul didn't feel good about it, but they, it was either that or am I going to be able to feed my kids and put food on the table, right?
This is why we have to make sure that we as a community look after those who did lose it all or risk it all. So people like Crystal Mitchell, that cop who quit, a lot of people don't agree with her or her current political views. That's fine. But she's one of those rare people who didn't have a fridge full of food and what was the other thing? And mortgage free like yourself. She actually lost a job and is finding it extremely difficult now to get a job. And so I think we just need to look after those people. But, to talk about what you're talking about, influences and people that have said to you, I don't agree with it, but I had to because of work. I get that. But what about the people who actually are fooling themselves? So let's talk about Hamish and Andy, right? Two legends of comedy. My staff member contacts Andy Lee on the back of your The Silence is Deafening. And he says, hey, Andy, how much were you paid to push this This Is Our Shot ad he did for Channel 9? He gets into this big public fight with Andy Lee of Hamish and Andy over how he was paid nothing. You're a conspiracy theorist just saying we're being paid, but I can tell you we're paid nothing. He's literally paid by Channel 9. His next contract is signed by Channel 9. His previous contract is by Channel 9. Channel 9 comes around and says, hey, mate, need you to do us a solid and help the community and do this campaign over here, our shot for the shot or whatever it was. Mate, he's not even aware of the huge pressure around. Like he's so self-righteous in the way he's shooting down my staff member is my point. So I think some people are a little bit blind to their own blindness.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I've seen that firsthand, and I've seen it behind the scenes, and that's the tough one, is trying to get those people out of their malaise. And I know there were, like I said, people that didn't voice their concerns and because they were scared about losing their jobs, one thing. It was the people that went above and beyond that of like, yeah, the government's always right, you plebs need to do this. And it's just like, well, you're flying private, or you're eating caviar, or you have a nice, whether you're an athlete and they've chartered a jet where you're not with regular people. Yeah, your life's still okay. Like, you need to understand that, especially if you're a laborer, it was like, what are they going to do? What are they going to labor from Zoom? You know what I mean? Like, like my father, like mechanic, carburetor specialist, like, well, he's going to build carburetors for customers via Zoom. You know what I mean? Like I just felt like it was so hypocritical. Oh, it's not that hard, stay home. It's like, well, people have mortgages, people have kids to feed, people have school fees, people have all these kinds of things. And yeah, the government can throw a shitload of cash at it, but for how long? And now we're seeing the tail end of what that's done is inflation's out of the arse. A dollar's not worth a dollar. And then on top of that, the RBA said it's a good time to lift rates because we've got to stem inflation. So who gets affected again? It's the poor. It's the people that are struggling day to day. Now that's on steroids again. And then now, with all that comes depression, comes suicide, comes anxiety, comes crime. But no one was really talking about that. I spoke about this from the start, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I was like, the effect the lockdowns are having on kids and school. Go to school a week, then you're out 4 weeks. Go to school a week, then you're out 4 weeks. Oh, let's do Zoom for 6 months. Oh, no, you can go now, or you can't go. And I saw it with my nephew. Like, as soon as he heard the word lockdown, couldn't go to school, the kid wouldn't eat for days, if not weeks. And I know that wasn't the only child or the only family dealing with that. There was a lot of people reaching out. The kids were just, non-respondent at times, or just like, I don't want to go outside. Even when lockdowns ended, they didn't want to go outside. So I don't know, we're back on the lockdown stuff, but it needs to be discussed. And I think the reason for this podcast and these discussions is so it doesn't happen again. So we don't allow our government officials and chief health officers to do these kind of things again to the people.
Yeah, okay. Just a quick shout out of love for you, mate. You didn't have to speak out on various issues, but you did. So thank you for doing that. I think a lot of people respect you and listening to you, are listening because you have stood up for the little man, a little woman. That sounds terrible. The working class, the people who are most affected, little or big. You've stood up for them when you didn't have to. So thank you.
Appreciate it. And I cop flack because the old adage or the old quote is from most people, a millionaire sitting in his mansion just throwing shots at the government. And I'm like, that's the exact reason why I should be quiet. They've actually proven my point. I should be quiet by definition because I've got my money. I've got like a fridge full of food. Kids are happy. Wife's happy. I can, do whatever I want to do. I can go on a fly to wherever I want, whenever I want for a holiday. I should be quiet and just live my life. But I was affected greatly by, because I just always relayed, like, if I was 10, 11, 12 and this happened to my father and our family, we'd be fucked. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, that government money wouldn't have really helped. It would have just kind of stemmed the bleeding for a little bit till that wound opened up again. We'd be screwed. Like, who's getting their car serviced during a lockdown when you can't even drive outside your house further than 5 kilometers? So I looked at that and I was like, wow. My father was already, highly strung at times, running his own business, so at times stressed. So then you factor that in with now being inside an enclosed space in a home for 24 hours a day, mum, dad, sister. That can't be good neither for families. We talk about domestic violence and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that would happen, but you never know. So that was why I spoke about it. It wasn't so much as, get some clout or get people like, I was like, no, like this is wrong. And it's more for the kids. Like, adults, I think it's very hard to change grown adults, grown men and women, I think. But if we can help change our kids' paths and journeys, that's kind of why I speak out. But appreciate that. PR guy unmasked. Let's get on that real quickly. I've had some interactions. PR guys come after me numerous times, so be it, whatever. We've had some back and forths, and he has his right to do so. I've got no problem with that. I like some of the points you made not long ago. You didn't support the unmasking, even though you don't really like PR Guy 17, neither do I.
Nope.
And I tend to agree with you. The only kicker I have is I only support knowing if our taxes are paying for it. I think that's the slippery slope. If our taxes are paying for that account to be ran and all the tweets, that's where I kind of draw the line. I think that should be noted. But look, the non-debate on socials, it's a slippery slope because I see some people say, oh, well, abuse shouldn't be tolerated. But then I also see that this is an in for the government now to be able to get into like the way Avi legally, whether you like him or hate him, he legally got the details, which I think is a huge concern. And just to finish this off, I made a similar point about the protesters, the lockdown protesters being slapped down by Vic Pol. And there were a lot of people cheering on what Vic Pol did, saying, oh, those dirty lockdown protesters, they're prolonging the virus, they're putting us all in danger. And I made a point of saying, like, the precedence is now being set for you people that just one day in the future, you're going to be supporting something that you're not going to be supporting something the government's got, and you might want to protest. And the precedent is now being set. You can be shot with rubber bullets. And I was trying to explain to people, like, this is not right based on that. Not based on whether I agree with the lockdown protesters or not. It's bad because it's going to come full circle and eventually bite you in the ass. Let's say a different government's in power in 10 years and then you go protest something green or something left or whatever, you get shot by rubber bullets. The precedent's being set. It was okay back then. And this is a similar thing with PR guy unmasked. Give me your thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah. Look, I'll keep it brief. I think everyone's sick of this topic, but my problem's not with Arvin. My problem's with the government and using the way, just like what you've said, the same standard you apply now to your enemies will be, you're fashioning a rod for your own back. It'll be applied to you later on. And if you look at the broad history of defamation laws in Australia and you look at the broad history of government digital identities and surveillance and the attack on anonymity online, this is long before Rebel News came on the scene or RV joined Rebel News. This is long before PR Guy created a Twitter account. They've been attacking it forever. In the UK, we'll be reporting on this week with our show, The People's Project. They're doing it in the UK right now. They've been doing it in the US. You look at Assange, you look at Snowden, you look at the Identify and Disrupt bill here in Australia, which laws now, which is passed. It's just a long history of governments trying to unmask citizens. So yes, in this case, you want to argue defamation, blah, 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 whatever. My point is bigger than that. My point is more than this case. My point is we have to be careful with allowing the elites and the powerful in Australia to continue going down the path of removing our ability to fight back against them. And one of those very powerful, important ways is anonymity online. And most importantly, we need to fight back against it because most of the population will probably support these anti-democratic and anti-freedom initiatives pushed by government because they're pushed in the name of safety. So the anti-bullying bill is all about, both in Victoria and federally, it's about protecting people online. This is how ScoMo couch it. This is how Fiona Patton in Victoria it describes these kinds of authoritarian bills. It's to protect you. And I'm just saying be careful. That's all, okay? And PR Guy, I've invited him on. The first time I ever saw him was in that interview with Geordies, and I found him quite a reasonable guy in that interview. And so I'd be happy to talk to him.
Yeah, makes two of us. But yeah, I think it's just one of those things that's disappointing. I think that they can I guess the masses that aren't that in tune to reading a lot every day, they might get 10 minutes with their coffee, and because they work long hours, they come home, they get 10 minutes. They see this as a good thing. Oh, it's safety. Well, social media, for instance, they have protocols in place to stop that kind of abuse. You can ban certain words being sent to you. You can block people. You can mute people. Whatever, right? And it comes down to, again, we're going to protect you because you're too silly to protect yourself. And the problem with these laws is they then go over the line and they can be used in other capacities. And that's what you're saying. It's a very, very slippery slope of granting government access to social media accounts. Well, they can also, has that law been passed so they can actually access your social media account and navigate?
The Identify and Disrupt bill, I chatted to Greg Barnes, SC, a barrister, about this. He's been fighting, he's like a lefty guy pretty much. He's been fighting on the Assange issue since 2001, since the Patriot Act. He explained the Identify and Disrupt bill that enables them to masquerade as you by infiltrating your accounts. So they can go to a social media company and say, give us control over this account. I mean, there's checks and balances along the way, but come on, we've seen how that kind of fails in various government departments. So yes, it's very dystopian, the reality that we're moving towards. And if we're all just busy arguing about who do you stand for, PR guy 17 or Avi who stood up for us during protests, well, you've missed the point, mate. There's something bigger going on.
Yeah, exactly. What's going on through the back door. And on top of all that, Avi did get an apology from Victoria Police over the last couple of days, which was interesting in itself, the fact that they've put that on paper, because I would assume now he has something to go to the courts with.
Yeah, look, I get slammed for standing with PR guy when he was fighting with Avi, and they're like, why do you hate Avi? And now I'm congratulating Avi, saying he's braver than me to do his, even if I don't agree with his style, he's braver than me. I couldn't do what he does. And now everyone's screaming at me for supporting a cooker, they call him, called Avi. I'm like, I just can't win, man. I'm just trying to stand on principle.
If you've got both sides, Matt, yeah, you're doing it right. That's my opinion. I've obviously had the left go after me numerous times. I've had the right go after me numerous times, and I feel like I'm winning. If I've got both fringes of politics or extremes on both sides hating me, I think it's a very principled approach, and it means it's common sense, and it means you're actually given your opinion, not the party line. For the people out there that are all on one side, giving the party line, I think lost causes for the most part. All right, moving on. Australia, 3 flags, 1 nation, Matt.
Mate, this story is insane.
I can't believe it. It is mind-boggling. Now I'm going to I've got nothing against the Torres Strait Islander flag or the Aboriginal flag, Indigenous flag. I guess my point is there any other countries in the world that have 3 flags flying?
All right, can I look? I'll give you a rundown of what actually happened. Right, so this is Sydney. This is my harbour bridge. This is where I grew up, and I'm very sad to see this. Okay, everyone. There's a Aboriginal lady called Sri Toka, right? Sri or Tree. Sri launched a flag campaign. Right, this is like 5 years ago, and she wanted to have the Aboriginal flag on the bridge. Fine, right? And she said, you can't put a price on equality. Well, I'm sorry, Sri, you can. In this case, it's $25 million for a flag. So she, her petition, she got 177,000 signatures to put this flag on the bridge. The government says, yeah, okay, we'll do it. It doesn't, by the way, it doesn't matter if you get 300,000 signatures against vaccine passports. Nobody cares. But you get 177,000 for Aboriginal flag on the bridge, they'll jump to your tune. So she gets these signatures. The government says, yep, we'll put a flag on the bridge. They get quotes. This is the interesting part of the story. They get multiple quotes, and they end up announcing that they're going to install a 3rd flagpole for $25 million. This is on the 19th of June, 2022. And they say it's part of a $401 million investment in the Closing the Gap initiative in the New South Wales budget. So 5% of the total budget of Closing the Gap initiatives is spent on this single flagpole for $25 million. Does that sound like good value for money to you?
Oh, mate, a bit of Scotch tape would have got the job done, I reckon. That's yeah. Is it? So some of the money's gone just to the rights. Then is that what I'm missing, or is it strictly for the for the build of
No one's talked about rights. They've just talked about how difficult it is with a moving traffic underway underneath and safety and so on. So fair enough, right? Maybe. So within 24 hours, the the New South Wales government, Perrottet, he's at a press conference, right? And they said, why is it $25 million? He says, I don't know, but I'm told that these things cost that much. Unbelievable. Then he senses the backlash, and within 24 hours, he's now saying, "Oh, quickly, everyone in the whatever department was, you need to conduct a review into the cost of this $25 million announcement that we've already made to find out if we're getting value for money." So he's doing things in reverse, right? It then comes out that the government did receive multiple quotes, and some quotes came after the announcement, some were before. One of the ones before was Poseidon Poles. So Poseidon Poles and Flags. Poseidon Poles and Flags have revealed to the Daily Telegraph that it had sent the government a much lower figure than the $25 million for a pole that they quoted. The Sydney Northern Beaches based company said it would be less than $650,000 to replace 3 poles. It also estimated the cost to replace each pole would be between $175,000 and $200,000. There's another company called Gold Spar, were also in the media saying they were shocked by the government's estimation, suggesting it would cost between $30,000 and $40,000 for a regular 20-meter pole to be installed. So for some reason, and I'm sure Michael West or some other journalists will uncover some kind of corruption, because that's what politicians are good at on all sides, why they chose this $25 million deal. But in the end, they've decided, no, we're not going to install the pole after all. They've flipped on their reasoning, and they've said, we are now going to remove the New South Wales flag from the bridge. So at the moment, there's an Australian flag and a New South Wales flag. They're going to remove the New South Wales flag, so screw you. And they're going to put up the Aboriginal flag on that secondary pole, thus obviating the need to install a pole at all. And they've also, just to calm down the Twitter lefties, they've increased the $401 million investment in the Closing the Gap initiative to $716 million.
Sounds like a good deal if you can get it.
Oh, yeah. Mate, I'm just so over the way the Liberals stand for nothing. They get 177,000 signatures on a thing, and they just do whatever it says, and then they just rip down the other flag, put up the other flag, double the money they're giving to Closing the Gap. They just really transparently weak, Whereas Labor, you've got to respect Daniel Andrews and Palaszczuk and Mark McGowan. They have balls, man. They will stand up and say, "You're a bunch of bigots. How dare you? We're doing this." And the Liberals will attack them, and the Labor Party will say, "Screw you. We're doing the right thing. Screw you. Screw you." So they stand. The Liberals fold every time like a cheap suit.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I think Labor plays politics much better. They're stronger. They seem like they're, it is more cultish, but they are more, at least a united front to an extent, whereas Liberals are all over the place. It's like if the opposition never needed something to win an election, it would be the last 2 years, and we just don't hear enough of them. But I guess my point with the 3 flags as well is, would you be okay with changing our flag, our national flag?
There's 2 questions here, right? If you're asking honestly that question, then we can talk about the flag and thoughts. But most people are not asking that. Most people, so if I said, for example, no, then most activists will say, "Oh, you hate Aboriginal people, are you racist? Don't you believe it was a genocide?" So the question that they're asking when they say, can we change the flag, is not that. It's, do you value Indigenous people? Do you accept that what happened to them was wrong? They're asking loaded questions behind, would you change the flag?
Mm. Yeah, I think.
So I need to know what you're asking.
What I'm asking is, there's nothing loaded towards those topics. To me, it's simply that we do have a rich Indigenous culture that is a very, very important part of Australia and the history. Torres Strait Islands also. I for one would not mind merging a flag. I honestly wouldn't. And this is it. This is a flag for our people. This is. This encompasses, Australia before the First Fleet. It also, has portions of the flag that point towards the First Fleet. I would be totally okay with that, but not, to your point, if you change it, it's like, oh, so you agree with this was bad. We need X, Y, and Z now more. Like, different story. But I think I would rather see one flag. Honestly, seeing 3-4 flags. When Albo's doing press conferences, I just look at it as like there's not many countries in the world that do that. like I'd have to do some research. I could be wrong. There's not very many I know of note that have, unless it's a state flag, that have numerous different federal flags, right? We're one of the few, right? So I would, as an Australian, I don't have an issue with it. I'm not pro England and that whole side of things, like to death, where the Union Jack has to be there and all that kind of stuff. I don't mind if we move away from that, in my opinion, but I would love for it to be a flag that's one for all, that we all look up to, and that's the country, Australia's flag, and then we get on with things. But to your point, like even if we change that flag, it's not gonna stop all the debates going on about numerous different things. It's not going to quail that at all. I think it's going to continue on, but that's just my thoughts on the flag.
If everyone was as rational as what you've just described your position to be, then I would immediately say, fine, change the flag, all good. But I know that's not what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen is just more activism. They'll gain 1 centimeter, then it'll be, okay, now we want another couple of centimeters. And the problem is, if we're going to do it, then let's do it. Like if you want to get rid of the Union Jack and recognize Indigenous populations in our history in our flag, well then you realize that we're from a colonial power. Like the Union Jack represents what we are. This representative, I can't remember what the word is. This monarchy-driven, a constitutional monarchy, right? Mm-hmm. We are empowered at law by the crown. Everything is the crown in this country, our entire system. So if you want to go republic and change the flag at the same time, okay, we can do that. I'm up for that. But be honest, at the moment we've just got activists warring on one side and then perhaps activists on the other side saying, no, we want to maintain conservatives in general. But what's going to happen is we're going to have creeping activism, which is what's happened. So the flag is now permanently replacing New South Wales flag. So we're going to have this creeping, they'll get a little bit, they'll get a little bit. When Labor's in, they'll get a lot. When Liberals in, they'll get a little bit. But overall, they're still getting a little bit without us actually having a proper referendum, which failed last time, can I point out, the Republic referendum.
Yeah, sure did.
We should just do that. We should just mount a case and do it that way. But they've worked out very shrewdly that you don't win that battle with the Australian population. The way you win is the salami method, bit by bit by bit. And people turn around and go, whoa, what happened? Well,
how have we gone this far? Yeah. Like with the mandates would have been a prime example of that. But yeah, I agree with that. I think that's the big issue with it all. It's just we see it with another group that has slowly, moved on and inch by inch, and you're like, how do we get here? Which is a group we all know very, very well. But it is interesting. I just, I think for most people looking at the flag debate, I don't think they're that, like we said earlier, they're 10 minutes with their coffee and 10 minutes at night. They're not too in tune with all the specifics of it and how it then encourages other groups to encroach a bit more and a bit more and a bit more and push this, push that. I think people are just like, you know what, just fucking change the flag. Who cares? Let's just do this, change this flag and let's get on with it. But it's, I guess, to your point, it's not as simple as that.
You sound like every mainstream, good in a good sense. You sound like every fair dinkum, normal, rational Australian out there, right? And that's really the problem, is that the activists amongst us are not fair and rational and mainstream. They're actually just going to keep taking as long as we keep bending over. So at some point, Australia, I know we like to just rest and say she'll be right. At some point, we're going to have to fight a couple of small battles, whether it's what your kids learn in school or whatever. You're going to have to stand up and say, hang on. No. Men can't be, what do they say? Some women can have penises, right? No. At some point, you're going to have to stand up and say, excuse me, we can talk about respecting trans people. We can talk about a whole bunch of stuff. We can talk about valuing people despite their sexuality. But we can't say women can have penises, okay? Can't say it. It's not true.
But how have we come from, touching on that real quick, how have we come from, I respect your right to do what you want to do, be what you want to be, if you want to go do this, if you want to go do that, not a problem. Doesn't affect my day. It's your thing, right? Whereas now it's like you also need to buy in and believe what I believe, which is that men can have babies. It's like, hang on a second, I don't believe men can have babies. Well, you're a bigot. Well, it's like, hang on a second, I'm not a bigot. I'm not against your lifestyle. If that's what you want to do, it's your choice. You're an adult. Yeah. If you want to, you want to trans, you want to, your sexuality, what you do, whether you're multiple sexual partner, whatever you want to do, go and do it. but don't then bring it on me or my children, right? And I think that's where I'm stuck in this realm of like, am I the crazy one? Like,
No, you're not.
you know, and I think most people are in my boat. I think they don't agree with it, but they also are scared to say things. And with that silence, the encroachment begins. Like you said, it's inch by inch by inch to where what we're seeing right now in the US, people were hitting me up with like on social saying it was a conspiracy theory that I was posting this stuff about, you know, the drag queen hours and all that. And libs of TikTok's just completely exposed it. Like the account's getting suspended for reposting things that are posted by teachers and whatnot for people that aren't familiar of, you know, there's teachers out there that are, you know, for 5, 6, 7-year-olds putting in transition closets in their classrooms, you know, and you're just like, hang on a second, like, is that something you might want to discuss with the parents or you know what I mean? And that's where I draw the line is like you start pushing your language, your way of thinking on me or children, I've got a problem with that. And I'm gonna voice my concerns on it. But if you want to do it, I've got no problem with that. And that's where as soon as someone says, you know, you're an ex-phobe or this phobe or that phobe, people, oh, no, I'm not. Oh, no, what can I do to fix that? It's like, no, I'm not that, but I'm also not all in with you neither. Like, you know what I mean? You can be in between the two.
Do you want to skip forward a topic to religion and come back to surveillance after? Because you're basically describing this religious impulse. I think that people don't realize that that you can't – okay, secularism, the idea that the Australian mindset basically, don't worry about religion, do what you want over there, leave me alone, you know, don't worry about the church and so on. That's fine, but we're noticing people are taking up causes – then maybe it's not a Muslim cause or a Christian cause or whatever, but they're taking up causes. So this drag queen hour that you're seeing in the US, doesn't it have that smell of like proselytizing, convincing, like a religious zeal to it?
100%. And that's why I wanted to bring up religion, because religion and its place in community. I'm not over religious, Catholic family, you know, Croatian background, so all that. But we weren't someone that went to church every week, but we'd go every now and then. And I'm starting to see, you know, like you said, there's ideals and lifestyle choices that are now that they're religions, they're cults, and it's the same people that, like I said, shun religion and God's a fairy in the sky. You're an idiot to believe in that. Well, you're bowing down to a chief health officer or a president or a prime minister to every single word, 100%. I'm all in with that. That's my party. Yep. Whether you're a political party, you're red or you're blue, I'm all in with that. And then it's gone into sexuality now. It's gone into, you know, if you're not an ally and you're not overly supporting us, you're a bigot and you hate us. It's like, what the hell? How have we come to that point? And it's just so mind-boggling. And once you bring that into children whose minds aren't molded yet, who idolize their teachers, if your child gets the wrong teacher who's got some lifestyle that you don't agree with, being pushed on that child, you're stuck in a rock and a hard place trying to figure that out, especially if you're in the public school system.
Well, you just said, how did we get to that place? I have been learning from my guests in an interview recently that we've always been in this place. There's always been a religious impulse in humans. And if you look at the way the Catholic Church had a stranglehold on the Western world for a long time, right, where if you spoke out against the Catholic Church, so you could replace the word Catholic Church with CRT or LGBTQI community or whatever, right? If you spoke out against the Catholic Church, that was this huge sin, and society, you become a pariah. Just like now, if a corporation came out and said what I said about Pride Month, which is Pride Month is disgusting, not because of your lifestyle, because of pride. Pride is not a virtue. We should not be celebrating this incessant focus on self when the thing our world needs is a focus on others, not on the aggrandizement of self. There's a real big problem in psychology that people have been writing about. Anyway, if a company came out and said, no, you're not talking about respecting LGBTQI people anymore. You're forcing things down people's throat and saying, you must affirm me. And if you don't affirm me and my lifestyle and it's all about me. If you don't affirm me, then you are evil. Any corporation cannot say stuff like that. It's exactly like the Catholic Church was years ago. It's exactly like cults are today. And having been in and seen cults myself, it smells exactly the same.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's just moved to a different aspect of the community, I guess. But I mean, it's just interesting to looking at it from above, a bird's eye view of it, of how it's changed from decade to decade. But it's, I guess, the Catholic thing's a fair point. I mean, my wife and I eloped for a number of reasons. Didn't tell anyone, and we had family members like, it's not a real marriage because it wasn't in a Catholic church, and you're just like, what? You know what I mean? So it's a very fair point, I think, and that's the ideals that kind of my grandparents were kind of instilled into them. Whereas I guess the newer generation, it's a similar path and playbook, and it's just a different aspect. It's just gone more towards politicians or sexuality or kind of who I am as a person, all that kind of stuff. So can we pull it back? That's the question.
Okay, so I've had a couple of guests recently. Alex Washburn and Professor Thomas S. Harrington both talked about this religious impulse in humans. And I'm not sure either of them are particularly religious, but they've just noticed that there's we don't acknowledge this. We think that we can just live. So Aussies, I described you earlier, like a very rational mainstream Aussie who's just trying to get on with life. That attitude needs to start to recognize that there is a religious impulse in humans. I'm not telling you've got to go and get a religion. I'm just saying recognize there is an impulse there, because that's why you have the AOCs of this world prosecuting with such religious zeal. And we need to be aware of that so that we can defend against it if you want to stop some of this craziness. I mean, to sum up the craziness, there's a data scientist from Iraq or Afghanistan, I think, he was on my podcast, and he told me a joke. And he said, this really sums up the religious kind of adherence to authority we're seeing right now. He said, there's this guy who he goes over to his neighbor's house and says, listen, I need to borrow your donkey. My donkey's not well. I need to use yours. And his neighbor says, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have a donkey. It died, so I can't lend you my donkey. And so the first guy says, look, I really need this donkey because I've got to move this stuff in my field. And as he's talking, he hears this eeo, eeo. I don't know how to make a donkey noise, but he hears this donkey noise from out the back of his neighbor's house. And the neighbor looks at him and says, listen, mate, you've known me your entire life for 30 years, okay? Are you going to believe me or the donkey? Yeah. The point being is these religious scribes that we've set up, whether it be science or LGBTQ, like you can't have an opinion because you're being transphobic, which we just saw recently in the US. I don't know if you've seen that video of a Harvard professor in being questioned at government saying your line of questioning is transphobic, sir. They're saying it's such a religious thing. You can't question things you see or hear with your own ears and eyes. If you hear the donkey making a noise, well, you need to believe me anyway. And I think that's not rational. If you hear a donkey, there's a donkey. And I think they're asking us to almost in a religious way to have faith in them and their rules and their institutions. And we shouldn't.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And I think it's you got to read a lot, you got to study a lot, you got to kind of, I think people that read both sides of politics, both sides, people that have read a little bit about different religions too, I think just, trying to be a bit more worldly and educated on the facts as well, I think helps. But I mean, I've been blessed to be able to live all around the world. I think that's been huge for me, and kind of my makeup is I've lived in blue collar US, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I've lived in California. So I've seen the extremes within the same country. Same in Australia. I've lived in Croatia for a number of months, traveled the world, seen Japan, seen China, seen whatever, right? So I've been very, very fortunate, and I think that has helped me understand kind of different people and different ways of thinking. But the religion one's just an interesting one in my opinion, and it's, I think the people that are very critical of religion, I think religion somewhat has its place from a positive aspect of its community, right? So I think sporting clubs, I think hobby clubs, men's sheds, they exist for a reason. Community is a religion in itself. I really believe that. I think it is important when it's done positively and in the right way. Now, obviously religions that become overly cultish, that's the question. Can you be involved in some of these religions and some of these things without being all in? You know what I mean? And that's the hard thing, because people feel like, you know, if you're a new person to a church, right? You go in and there's that new person. He's not. Is he really that religious, or is he just doing it for XYZ, or she doing it for XYZ? You got to kind of show that you're for the team and you're for the cause, and you have to go to the extreme. So, I guess my point is, with some of these things, there's just not really a balance where you can be halfway in, halfway out, right?
Well, I mean, I would take a different view too, because I mean, I am a Christian. I am religious in that sense, I guess. I go to church all the time. But my argument's not even about don't be religious. My argument is, if you want to be religious, fine, do whatever. But just recognize that humans do this stuff. It's easy to sit in the suburb and say, you know, just relax, you know, be half in, half out. But there are people who are all in, man. And you've got to recognize that these people who are all in, some of them are going into education departments and corporations. Some of them are going into governments, and they're prosecuting their religious agenda. And so I'll even have a go at, so I'm a Christian, right? I have a real problem with Christians in the own faith that I practice getting all like, we're going to go into government, we're going to take over. I hate it. I was part of churches for a long time growing up where this idea of dominionism, this idea of we're going to go in there and take over the government. I think that's wrong, man. That's anyway, I don't want to go too deep into it. Just to say, be aware of it, Australians, okay? Not everyone is sitting back having a beer on a Friday night. Some people are going to youth group, all right, of various faiths. And these people are driven and motivated to change your world, to change your government, your councils, your teaching, your school experience for your kids. So if you're not aware to that, once again, you're sleeping. I feel like I'm saying that this whole podcast. You're asleep, Australia. Wake up.
Yeah. And it is somewhat by design. I think that we want, you know, I think that the higher ups want people kind of asleep, you know, go to work 9 to 5, pay your taxes, know a little bit about the world, enough for us to scare you into staying locked down, but don't read too much. Like, don't overthink things. It's never as bad as that. We've always got your best interest in mind, and I think that's the machine, that's the cog. And I'd probably get called a conspiracy theorist for even saying that, but I think it's a reality. And I know I can only relate to me being a young fella and family we grew up in. We were in that machine and that cog, and I didn't realize all that outside noise. And you talk to people that work, you know, 9 till 7, 9 till 8, work long days. Ask them about some of the topics we're discussing, Matt, and you'll get your answer. They have no idea for the most part. That's not a knock. That's not a knock. Some don't give a shit. They're like, I don't want to know about that. I don't care. And others are like, I didn't know that. Like I told, you know, my friend, you know, like, you know, there was a swimmer in the US in the NCAA. I told one of my friends that's a man that's now transitioned to a woman and is breaking all the records. And he thought I was he literally didn't believe me. Yeah. All right, Bogues, piss off, mate. You pull on my leg again. You pull on it, and it's like, because he's everyday labourer, right? He's like, no, I don't believe that. There's no way. But they're not reading daily like us and on socials or the cesspool of socials to see all this stuff. But it's just to my point. I think people that are in that machine of, you know, wake up, kids breakfast, kids to school, work, coffee, lunch, you know, pick up the kids, sport, sleep. That's the majority of Australians' reality, right?
Hey, what did the labourer think when he finally realised it's a real story?
Oh, basically said, it's fucking crazy. That's bullshit.
Okay.
Point blank. Wasn't a fan of it, and he'd be labelled a transphobe. He's just like, no, I've got a daughter. I don't want my daughter competing against men that are grown men that have then decided they want to be women. And I think that's a fair point. I think, you know, where that's transitioned to, which is interesting, is the transition thing is feminism was once aligned to the LGBTQ community. I think it's completely, you know,
that's right,
gone separate now because of that, and that's the main reason. But there's still a lot of feminists that are scared to speak out against men that are playing women's sports, and it's like, well, if you have a daughter, and you know, it could be debilitating to a young girl, like, you know, 14, 15, 16. Making her way up in whatever sport and just gets pummeled by someone who's, you know, just transitioned at 16, 17 with the bone density of a male and muscles and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to get into all that, but that's noted. That's no one's talking about the young girl that might now quit the sport, you know, and so yeah, there's been a collision of two comets with the whole feminist movement and the LGBTQ community with all that stuff. But like I said, I want to reiterate, I have no problem with whatever lifestyle you want to live, whatever you want to do, but with things like sport and young girls, young boys, I've definitely got a problem with it. So that's where I kind of draw the line.
Yeah, well, the whole point of this little segment was that it's religious, mate. It's if you speak out against it, you're a heretic. So even the LGBTQ community is being pushed by some of the trans community now, saying, that you're not recognizing trans rights, or that great conspiracy. So one of the questions you said to people, what questions do you want to ask Matt? And one of them said, what does he think is the most out there conspiracy that he doesn't want to talk about on air, right? I was trying to think of some. There's a few, I guess, but one that comes to mind for this segment is these people saying one day they'll try and make pedophilia normalizing it. They'll try and normalize it. Mm-hmm. I always thought that was never going to happen. Like, that's just ridiculous. We won't stand for that. But that's unfortunately started.
It has. What's it called? Is it MAPS? Minor attracted persons, right? That's the actual there's a formal name for it. As soon as it gets a formal name, it's someone's trying to normalize it, in my opinion. As soon as it gets an abbreviation or a name, and it's absolutely disgusting. Like, it is. And don't even get me started on laws with this stuff and the the sentences that blatant pedophiles and child abusers get compared to someone who made a mistake on his taxes. It's just ridiculous. It's an absolute joke. And I know for a fact. I mean, I know someone very close to me was almost abducted by a serial sex pest pedophile predator. Was almost abducted, like almost dragged into a car. At a young age, and basically go to the police to report it. Oh yeah, we know about him, but he didn't really get you in the car. So, it's like, what? Are you serious? You know what I mean? And it's and then as a father of that girl, you go and do something to this guy, you end up in jail. Like, it's backwards. It's really, really backwards. But moving on, let's finish off with a couple more. The surveillance nation. So, you've been involved with this in your previous life,
yep.
So you can talk to this really, really, seeing what's happening overseas with, obviously, China is the one that comes to mind with the social credit system. People are pretty well in tune to how that all works over there, but we're starting to see it
happen here, right?
Yeah, never happened here until you talk to Bunnings and was it Target or Kmart? What is the reasoning? I've seen their argument, their CEOs come out and said that it's the reason. So for everyone out there, Bunnings have a few Bunnings stores trialed facial recognition when you walk into the store. And I think a Target or a few Kmarts have done it as well. And the reasoning, Matt, is it's for your safety. It's for your safety and our employees' safety. That was the quote. It's for our employees' safety and our workers' safety. Now, I don't know about the last time someone walked into Bunnings and just caused anarchy, other than being mad that his hammer was $1 more expensive. But this is pretty scary stuff, man. I mean, it's a corporation just on its free will saying we're just going to introduce facial recognition. Now, there is some pushback by, was it ACCC or someone's pushing back on it now because of all the public sentiment against it. But, I mean, you can't exactly go and shop anywhere else these days when it comes to Bunnings. Like, if you need hardware stuff, you might see the mirage of a Mitre 10 every now and then, every 15 Bunnings. But, like, they've kind of...
mirage.
Yeah, they've kind of... They cornered the market, right? So, like, the people that say, it's a corporation, it's their rules. If you don't want to go there, shop somewhere else. Like, if I live in, like, a rural area and the only hardware stores are Bunnings, where am I going?
Exactly. It was Bunnings, Kmart, and the Good Guys.
What's their reasoning? Yeah. What are they doing?
What is their reasoning? Well, you've given their reasoning.
What's your opinion?
Well, okay, so what they're doing, right, is so I had a facial recognition company and we were developing algorithms to do exactly this. So I can explain it to you with some level of authority and detail. That company that I had now is now closed down due to very poor business partner management, and I've lost tens of thousands of dollars, which I didn't have to lose. But anyway, that's closed down. But what we do is you can actually track data points on a face. So just like your fingerprint is unique, right? But only because they can match 50, 200, 2,000. It's a matter of getting as many points as you can on that fingerprint. The more, the better. Same with the face. You can match multiple points on the face. So even if you see two Asians, now I'm the only for some reason, I'm allowed to be racist towards my own race. But anyway, we all look alike, right? If you see two Asian people that look fairly similar to you in your white privilege, They actually not similar to a computer. A computer will look at me and my Asian brother and say, well, I'm only half Asian, but like if even similar looking, even identical twins, our facial recognition algorithms will be able to find quite a large difference between even identical twins because the facial points, you can get as detailed as you want. That is exactly the data that Kmart, Good Guys, and Bunnings were collecting. So there's a camera at the front door. This is not just CCTV footage. Like there's an image of Bogues walking into Bunnings in Brisbane. That's not what this is. It's data points. So it's like code to say your fingerprint, Bogues' fingerprint, or in this case, face print, walked into this Bunnings at this time. And what they were using this for, and what they've told us what they're using this for, which I believe, because it makes sense, is they were, here we go. This is a quote. The facial recognition technology checks for matches against uploaded images, and they're referring to images of people who were previously in the store that they suspect of engaging in unlawful or threatening conduct. So the facial recognition technology checks the image of Bogues walking into Bunnings and looks for a match against uploaded image database and tries to see if you've already been flagged as a threat. Now, that obviously then logically means it must signal to security within Bunnings or the staff to say faceprint 169.354 walked in, which is Bogues, and he has previously been flagged and uploaded into this database because he yelled at the returns desk at a Bunnings in Melbourne. So that's what they're using it for, and it's plausible what their explanation of how they're using the face prints. The reason behind why they're using the face prints, they've said this technology is used solely to help keep team and customers safe and prevent unlawful activity. And this technology was solely used to review incidents of theft and for the purposes of customer and team member safety and well-being. It's a bit slippery, right? So they could argue that, yes, they're trying to prevent Bogues from going postal again, like he did last time in Melbourne, right, when he walks into a Bunnings. But are we okay with this? I mean, at the entrance to these stores, there's a tiny little sign, a little privacy sign off to the side, which I'm sure no one's read, advising you that they're doing this facial recognition trial. Are we okay with them collecting this fingerprint-like data? It's not quite DNA, but it's very, very personal to you.
I'm not a fan of it. One thing, who determines that what Bob Bogues did in Melbourne was enough to have him flagged?
This is the no-fly list in the US.
Correct.
If you get on the no-fly list, you're screwed, whether you're meant to be there or not.
You are literally screwed. And that's the thing. That could be as simple as an interaction of like, hey, you ripped me off on $5. Where's my $5? No, I didn't. And there's a bit of back and forth. That's deemed red flag. So who determines it? Is it someone in Victoria who's been, as was spoken about in the first hour of this, has been trained to, the government and the rules are always right. You've towed the line. You're red flag now. Or is it someone up in Queensland who's kind of a bit more open to it, right? Who determines it's a big factor? That's number one. Number two, is this a case of, it's going to protect team members, Matt, but is this a case of we see these self-checkouts, conspiracy theory here? Is this a nice little way to reduce our workers that we're employing, Matt? Because if you can essentially facial recognition on everyone as they're walking back out, if they don't pay, there's a way to figure out that person hasn't paid if he hasn't gone through the self-service checkout. Is this a way of further lowering the workforce?
I think we can't afford to be Luddites. So Luddite refers to, it's a long time ago, but basically people whose jobs and livelihoods were threatened by technology, so they went around smashing it. We can't afford to do that because this technology will march on regardless, right? We have to figure out how to keep it under control and make sure that people using it are not doing it for the wrong reasons. Because in the US, they're doing things like pre-crime, which we almost had in Victoria. In the US, they're doing predictive crime analyses now, which is fine. They're trying to figure out which area of crime will be in, but they're starting to apply that to facial recognition in the US, where they claim, in China claims already doing this, but in the US, they're claiming that they're able to tell someone's proclivity towards crime based on their facial features, those points that I mentioned earlier that you can train an algorithm to read. So that would mean that if they detect you coming into the store, they could say you're at a 35% increased likelihood to cause trouble within the store. And then, as you can see, we're just slowly kind of going towards the Minority Report version of pre-crime, which is holding people guilty before they've committed a crime. Now, this has been happening forever. This is the black person walking into somewhere into
With a hoodie
1950s
on. Yeah.
USA and they're saying, oh, you're going to steal something in here, aren't you? I'm going to follow you around the store to make sure you don't steal. That's profiling and racism. That's exactly what we're doing, heading towards here. And so I'm really pleased to say that the consumer group Choice, which we all know, Choice Magazine, Choice website, they revealed this Bunnings, Kmart and Good Guys thing, use of facial rec, and have said this is not good. And thanks to the noise they made, now the Office of OAIC, Office of Australian Information Commissioner, that's right, who oversee privacy and so on federally, they are now going to investigate. They're our privacy watchdog federally. They're going to investigate Bunnings and Kmart and hopefully the Good Guys over their use of potentially breaching privacy laws with this facial recognition tech.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. The fact that, as you said, it was such a small little sign, that's not a good thing. I think if they would have just came out publicly and said, hey, we're doing this, and made it a big thing so everyone was aware of it, I think it doesn't smell as much. The fact that it was relatively unknown till this media kind of splash, that's a concern. And I agree, we can't go out and smashing up technology. We're too in tune with it. AI is here. It is what it is. You got to deal with it. But with that comes now potential legislation or laws around it. Like there has to be something that you still should be able to protect your citizens. And I guess my forward thinking is with all of this and seeing the last 2 years with lockdowns and mandates is, you know, do the math. Like if facial stores, are you supposed to be out? Oh, you're at this Bunnings. This is 6 kilometres from your house. Facial recognition picked you up.
Exactly.
That's the really dangerous part of all this that people don't understand is, you know, look, then there's always people that will say, well, you're not breaking the law, mate. You shouldn't matter. Or you've got your phone on you. That's a tracking device. Yes, to an extent, true. But you can still turn your phone off or not bring it with you and you can still get out and about, right? But that's my concern is when these future lockdowns happen, which are going to have to happen again for something or another, it'll be much easier to police. And that's where we go back to what we said earlier around if it's used for good, it's good. If it's used for bad, it can be really bad. And that's where we're at with this.
Well, I'll give you a bit of tech insider knowledge as well. So you can actually bolt on this system. You don't need some expensive AI setup. You can take any camera feed. So there's CCTV everywhere in our world, right? You can apply these facial rec algorithms to any feed. So just be aware of that. It's easy. It's very easy to implement this
any feed.
Yes. In fact, you know the protests that I filmed? I don't know if you saw. I did a time lapse of one of the biggest. I think it was the biggest protest where some people were claiming 600,000, some people claim 100,000.
The one in Melbourne,
huge.
You mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
October last year, I think.
Yep.
September, October. I had a camera there on the side, and I collapsed 45 minutes or something into 2 minutes of people walking past, and I ran it through. Just calm down, people. I didn't do facial rec on you all. I ran it through people counting. So I tried to count how many people showed up. Unfortunately, I didn't get a great elevated spot. I was just in a bus stop. So we ended up counting, I can't remember what the number was. It was lower than, we couldn't count the sides either, down the sides of Bourke Street Mall. So it was, I think we counted 80,000 or something. Can't remember. But anyway, it would have been very easy for me to plug that footage into an AI, into my AI and into a database and easily pick out, yep, Bogut was in the crowd at 42 minutes and 30 seconds on the left of frame. That would have been very easy. And some people think they'll wear masks to get around it.
No, so we did tests, right? Cheekbones, right? And all that, yeah.
Well, we did tests with masks, and I thought you're covering quite a lot of the face because a lot of the data points do come below the cheekbone. And I noticed that, we noticed that it did degrade it a lot, but it wasn't zero. We were able to still get some pretty decent matches. And the scary part to me was that our tech guy who was building the tech stuff, he was telling me that they could radically improve the ability to detect raise that accuracy rate even with a face mask. So just using the upper part of the face. So yes, that's just a bit of like solid data people should know about. It's terrible. I think we need to be really careful about it because it's already it's happening. In 2003, I had a SS Commodore. So you hassle me about having a Tesla, but I actually think it's a wise move. I have true roots. It was a VY2 Cosmo Purple SS Commodore.
Oh, nice.
Catback exhaust resonator cut out, mate. It was loud.
Yeah. You might be arrested on the spot for driving that today in Victoria.
Oh, mate. That car was, my mum was driving it once. My license was suspended, of course. I got a 3-month suspension when I was 17 for doing 132 in a 110 zone, but I was on my P, so it was 90. So they thought I was doing 42 over. Little did they know I was on my way down from 210. So this is the M5 I shouldn't say such detail about my crimes, should I?
We don't have a statute in Australia either.
So I was suspended for driving, fair enough. My mum goes to drive my car. Police pull her over and she's like, what's wrong? And they come out knocking the window saying, where's Matthew? I'm like, what? And they said, well, we thought you were Matthew driving this car and he's suspended. So clearly there's license plate recognition technology. I think it's those cameras on the back of the highway patrol cars that are aimed at a 45-degree angle on the light bar on top. Yep. They're already doing LPN technology.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, in instant too. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the age-old one when a few of my old friends that lost their licenses would go and re-register their car in their missus' name if they had to still drive. Don't condone it, but for guys that lost their license and had to still be able to work to get to the job site or whatever they were doing, that was kind of the run around because they knew that technology would just pick them up straight away and just easy pickings. But I don't condone it. Just telling you how it all worked. But look, I just think, like you said, you go to a protest. I think the days are coming where you get a fine in the mail. That's what's going to happen. It is China-esque. That's what they do there. You just go straight off your funds straight away. You don't even get a bill reportedly over there. It just comes straight out of your Weibo account or whatever it is, or your money just gets deducted for jaywalking. Hey, you jaywalked. And people think that's a conspiracy theory. It's not. Look it up. So another part of this surveillance stuff is, have you been to the bank lately and tried to take out money?
Yeah, you read my story, didn't you? They questioned me what I was going to use my money for to buy that secondhand car I told you about, $9,000 car.
Okay, yeah. So I did the same about a year ago. I tweeted about it. I went and took out, I think it was, so everyone knows 10K is a trigger point where they start asking questions, but I went and took out, I think it was below, I think I took out 8,500 at that point. No, sorry, this one was above actually. It was about 13 grand. And I can't remember what I was getting it for. I think it was just to go play poker with some friends, I think, or just to have cash on me.
What? 13 grand to play poker? Slow down, folks.
10K buy-in.
Slow down.
But the lady's like, what is the money for? And I said, just a night out on the town.
Hookers and blow.
Yeah, basically I said a night out on the town. And she said, no, what's the money for? And I said... she was like dead serious before she gave me the money. And I was like, okay, I'm buying a car. I said it like that, like, I'm buying a car. Like, obviously lying, just give me my money. She's like, oh, yep, where are you getting the car from? I'm like,
shut up.
I couldn't believe, I'm not joking you, right? So I said, excuse me, I find you're questioning very intrusive. Like, can I just have my money? Is there a problem? Oh, there's a lot of scams going around right now with used cars, so we just want to make sure you're safe. Once again, for your safety. And I was kind of like, I was just somewhat, I thought it was an invasion of privacy. I'm like, what answer are you looking for? Like, as if I could lie to you. If I'm going to use it for a night out in the town and do something legal with it, I'm not going to tell you. So all you're doing is condoning lying. But then when I said car, she's like, can we get the blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, can I have my money, please? And it's becoming an issue now. So like I said, 10K was generally the threshold, but now if you go in sometimes for 7, 8, 9K, they might not give it to you on the spot. There was another story floating around where a guy needed to take out 7 or 8K and they said no because they thought it was going to be for some activity that was not legal because of his withdrawal patterns from the last 5 years. Nothing was ever at that point. And that's scary within itself with all this AI, all this tech. We saw Canada freezing the accounts of trucker protesters. That was insane within itself. And that, Commonwealth, Canada, Australia, not too far apart. So they reportedly even froze people's accounts that were donating to the protesters.
That's right.
Not just the money they donated, their accounts. They were freezing the insurance of the truck drivers. Now, whether you agree with the protests or not, separate thing. But this will be you protesting one day. So I have huge concerns with this, especially with the bank account stuff. I don't know if you've noticed bank accounts now. If you send to a new account, they hold your money now for an extra 2 or 3 days before they send it. I don't know if you've noticed that.
I haven't heard of that. Well, no,
yep.
No.
So Commonwealth Bank's doing it. If you send to a new, if I send you a wire for $1,500 for your time on Rogue Bogues podcast, which is never going to happen. It basically says we're holding this money for a couple of days for your safety. So it's scary. Look, I don't think the world's going to implode, but at the same time, I think some of this stuff just needs to be discussed and pushed back. And it'd be nice for these kind of things to come to the people. I think that's the big thing for me is the Bunnings thing. Bring it out there publicly, make some noise about it, and get a feel for whether people want to do it. Don't do it with a little sign and then get backlash and be like, oh, shit, we've got a government agency investigating us now. I think that's the wrong tack to take, and that's kind of why I think this stuff needs to be discussed.
Yeah, I'm most worried about the for your own safety. I put out a similar story to you saying, I did this and they wanted to know what it was for. And then people replied to me and said, I work in a bank, I work at Westpac, I work at ANZ, and the reason why we do it is this. And it was all about safety. And they're followers. They're great. They're followers of Discernible. But they're saying some of the stories they have of like old grandmas coming in saying, well, I've just discovered I have a Nigerian nephew who really needs my help and he's going to send me, I just need to send him $5,000 first. And so they would say, look, we ask these questions to protect vulnerable people like that. And that's great that you protected that grandma. But at some point, we as a society have to determine whether we're going to have a society built with an inherent level of risk in it and freedom and responsibility, or are we going to nerf everything and protect everyone like that old grandma? And personally, I think we should have a society that leans towards freedom and risk with responsibility. And if you want to go and get scammed by a Nigerian prince, then you should be able to, because the alternative is what we're heading into, which is exactly what you've described, like the trucker protest bank account freezing, which coincidentally they did in China, and a whole bunch of companies were not able to pay their staff. People were not able to access their savings to live off it. And so they planned to take mass transit in China to I think it was the Hainan province, to go to the headquarters of the bank to protest, to say you shouldn't freeze our bank accounts because we can't pay anyone. It's been 2 weeks. We can't do anything. And the government changed their COVID tick to a red cross, and they were unable to get on the mass transport.
That's right. Yeah, the cards wouldn't work, right?
In China. Yeah. No, I don't know about the cars, but they weren't able to get onto public transport.
No, the cards, like the actual Mikey or whatever, or scanning onto their phone or whatever, because it was a red tick. They just turned them off. Yeah, 100%. That's what conspiracy theorists have been talking about for 20 years, right? And I think we're getting close to that point where you can literally be turned off. We saw it in not a small extent, but with the mandates and where's your green tick, mate? You can't come in and have my coffee without the green tick. And I think that's what scares me is like, not so much for me and you or any other adult really. It's the children. Like it's like because the children won't know if you grow up with this being normalized. They won't really know what it was like before, and that's what we see with societal change and decades upon decades. Is that they're going to grow up thinking like, oh yeah, I should wear a face mask while walking around an oval with no one else near me because that's normal. My parents told me it was, and then their generation's going to do the same, right? Where it's like it takes adults that have lived a great life to push back on it for the kids. And that's what I see with this stuff. It just does worry me. There is the old adage, like I said, of like, if you're doing the crime, then you should, do the time. You shouldn't be worried with all this surveillance if you're a perfectly righteous citizen. Exactly. But I'm like, nah, it's gonna backfire because one day good people break bad laws too. Like good people break bad laws. It is what it is. I'm not talking like, felony type laws. I'm talking with this COVID stuff. Did you go 5.1 kilometers? You just broke a law technically. Did you put your bins out at 9:30? You broke a law, right? Or a directive at that time. So that's where it does get scary. But let's finish off with the world. Sri Lanka, Albania as well. Some protests. Netherlands. What the hell is going on? I mean, the Sri Lanka one is very, very sad. I don't know how much you've read up on this, but they point towards the WEF, our friends at WEF. I don't know if you saw the post that they deleted, Matt.
Yeah, I haven't read the actual post, though. I've only seen an image of it. What does it say?
Oh, something along the lines of 3 or 4 years ago, there was, the standard WEF page on its website about how they're going to turn Sri Lanka into a rich and prosperous country with this Green New Deal. We look at them today, and they're further slid down the equality charts, I think, and even poorer than they once were. That page from the WEF website has mysteriously been deleted. Which always makes you feel good. Yeah, but I mean, they went to talk about insurrection. I mean, they raided
They succeeded.
They raided their president's house, swam in his pool, lit it on fire. So much so as government officials and the president, private jets and private chartered boats out of there. When people miss 3 meals, 4 meals, 5 meals. This is the kind of things that happen. There were similar things in the former Yugoslavia, where my family's from, Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia at times, before even the big wars where things like this would happen. It's generally where the poor are so downtrodden and haven't had a meal, and then anarchy ensues. And we're seeing that in Sri Lanka, which is just mind-boggling, considering that they were, at some points, there's always been tension there, religious tension mainly, but
huge.
They were starting to get on their feet a little bit. I won't say they were surging, but they were starting to get a little better, and they put in that Green New Deal, and look what's happened.
We've got to be careful with correlation here. I'm not sure on whether the WEF thing is the direct cause of it, because there's been a lot of corruption in that government for decades.
Definitely wouldn't be direct. Definitely wouldn't be direct. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'd go back then and take that back. It's not the direct cause, but it does alarm me that the WEF has implemented some of their policies there through government, and then just deleted that whole post that's 4 or 5 years old because the country's now imploding. That also does not look good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm worried about, as always, just like you, worried about the everyday citizens. I don't stand with Russia. I don't stand with Ukraine. I stand with the citizens who are being hurt through all of this, everyday citizens. The same with Sri Lanka. So they've got, the president's fled to Maldives. He's left the prime minister in charge, and the prime minister has just put out an edict to say to the military, do whatever it takes to restore order. But you're right. What we're talking about here is petrol is almost gone in that country. Food supplies are way down in that country because the president was not managing the foreign exchange properly, so imports have tanked because they're a little island off the coast of India. And so this is not a matter of law and order, just go and shoot everyone. That doesn't work when you're hungry. Like I said to my wife during the lockdowns, when we were not sure, we weren't allowed to go to the supermarket more than once a day and all this kind of stuff. You weren't allowed to take your kids. I had a very difficult conversation with her. I said, listen, if it gets to the point, it probably won't, but if it gets to the point where they say you are not allowed to go and buy food for whatever reason, and my 2 little girls, 2 and 3 or whatever at the time, are crying at home because they're hungry, then I'll be one of those idiots on the news who took a shovel to a VicPol member trying to get into the supermarket. Because when it comes down to it, I will always choose my kids over time in jail or whatever it takes. And I think that's what we're seeing in Sri Lanka. Reality bites.
Yeah, it's sad to watch. That all works itself out, but with the government fleeing, it's going to be a while. I think Albania's had similar protests as well. Netherlands is an interesting one. Farmers are going crazy down there. Now, it's always interesting seeing the mainstream media not report on much of this stuff. You kind of have to get what you can off socials. Then you have to also try to really study the video and make sure it's not some asshole that's put a protest from some other protest, which, has got us all at one point, I think, until you really watch it and you're like, hang on a second, why is that? Why is there signs in Japanese at a Melbourne protest or vice versa? But yeah, a lot going on around the world. I'm not sure what's going on, man. Like it really is mind-boggling seeing, has it stemmed simply from the COVID mandates in these countries? Has it stemmed from failure in government? Has it been an all-in approach for the Great Reset, as the great Klaus Schwab has noted in his book, which is there in black and white, and you actually read through. Have you read it?
Yeah, I bought it. I did a review on it. Yeah.
Well, most of these points in that book have almost been fulfilled, haven't they? Like I think 6 or 7 out of the first those major dot points of whatever he was talking about have been close to fulfilled. I just saw a video on it yesterday, actually, but it's I don't know. Where are we? Where are we going? Is everything just going to go back to normal next year, or
No, come on.
No
way. I think the world, every year I do like a Christmas message like the Queen, and in December. And my message for this year was, listen, because everyone says, what's the year going to be like? And I said, look, 2022 is going to get darker, and it sure has, than 2021. But you know what? Lights shine brightest in the darkest places. So just find those lights and hang around those lights in the middle of the, like in a snowstorm, you hang out around the fire, even if it's a trash can outside. You just got to huddle around what you got. And so at the moment, I feel like good people like yourself and others, and hopefully us at Discernible, we are acting as lights in a darker world.
That's a good point. And yeah, during the lockdowns, there was always people talking about, try to do something and try to keep your mind occupied. I mean, for me, it was silly, but it was cooking. I finally had time to, being a pro athlete, I never had time to long cook anything because it was always next training, next game, next whatever. So, quick pasta, quick chicken, whatever. Or you get a lot of food from a restaurant, being on the road. But I actually had time to do 4 or 5 hour cooks of things and learn and make mistakes and all that kind of stuff. So that was something I kept my mind going. And I think it's similar, like in these dark times, try to keep your mind going with something. Another good thing I did was only tuned into those premier press conferences, I think, for maybe a couple of months, and then just completely switched it off. And then my mental health just went crazy good after that, as most people did. And the reason why I was listening to it, I was traveling a lot of the time within Australia, and I felt like I had to know what the hell was going on. So like, I don't want to get to an airport and be like, oh no, you can't fly to that place now because it's a red zone, or where's your pass, or where's this, or where's that. So I got to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to bunker down where I am, and I'm turning that shit off. And my wife and I made an effort to not turn on again, not turn on good old Daniel Andrews or Palashuk or Berejiklian when she was in power, and listen to those spiels. So that was the other thing. So I think your point about finding the light within your own life, got more time to spend with the kids as well, which was great for me. I know you've probably been home a bit more than you usually were with your little one as well. I think they're probably things that are positives that you wouldn't get in a normal world if you were working 9 to 5.
Yeah, look, if people actually, I agree with all that. Some people do want to fight back against what's happening, and you see a lot of protests, movements pop up, not literally just protests, but actual like other groups I don't really want to name, but people are trying to do stuff and politically organize, which is great. Go, do your thing, all good. But I think there's a bigger battle to fight. I think every single Australian, that normal Australian listening that I keep referring to your podcast, I think we can fight by teaching our kids some of the classical things that we all learn as kids, like what you said, falling out of a tree and that kind of stuff, not nerfing the world, teaching them risk management, like teaching them that the world is risky and embracing it, and teaching them rough play. And I think we can kind of vaccinate, if we can use that word, our kids against some of the crazy stuff we've been talking about during this podcast, some of the more religious people and activists and so on. If we embrace some of that classical stuff that we used to all know inherently, and reject this constant nerfing of the world. Nerfing of the world is not just wrapping kids in cotton wool at the playgrounds and putting fences up at cliffs. It's also intellectually.
Yeah, mentally.
It's in our language. It's in how we approach a matter. It's in whether you speak up or don't speak up. Like, there's so many areas that we're just trying to reach for safety. And I think we need to, it's the woman who, she gets scammed by the Nigerian prince because the ANZ teller didn't ask her why she was withdrawing $5,000. I think we need to start embracing risk and diversity and just the messiness of humanity, and not trying to make it this perfect utopian place, which I'd argue is actually a nightmare.
Yeah, it's never going to be perfect. And thanks for getting the podcast flag by mentioning a vaccine. What brand was that vaccine you were talking about? Was it Pfizer or Moderna?
Okay. You got to beep out when I said vaccine, and beep out what you just said, and we'll be right.
Yeah, we're going to get aggregated for sure with this, but I appreciate it, Matt. I like having these talks with people who are in tune to everything going on. I think we, back and forth on different things. I mean, we agree and disagree on different things. I think the religion take was really good to hear your point of view, being someone that's a bit more involved in religion and whatnot. But give us a few plugs and promos. Where can people find you? And we'll wrap it up.
All of our interviews are freely watchable. Not a fan of paywalls. So discernible.io is our website. All of our interviews are there. Guest list is incredible. I don't know how we've got these sort of people on. Like, Matthias Desmet, the guy who came up with mass formation psychosis, he's coming on the show in a couple of weeks. And the Great Barrington Declaration authors are coming on in a couple of weeks. And so I've got to try and figure out how to ask some half-decent questions to these people. But yeah, website's the best way to follow us.
And what's a grand plan for Discernible? Leave us with that. You take over the world?
Oh, damn, man. Look, I'm enjoying myself, still losing heaps of money. I used to have a house deposit, don't anymore. We're just living on savings. We do make some money. We have subscriptions at discernible.locals.com. I have a little private community there, but I've got 2.5 staff members. So it's a passion project, like you said at the beginning, We're not trying to – I think you can smell when people are trying to get fame, fortune, clicks. And I'm hoping people can smell with Discernible every decision we make is trying to serve the people watching. We're trying to be helpful.
Yeah, I think you've hit on the head. I think your platform has. I think like the long form stuff. I think having good, vast variety of guests on discussing different topics. You might not be an expert on all of them, as I'm not when I have guests on, and just listening and hearing, giving your point of view. I think I've enjoyed it all. So keep it up. I think people have, and we need more people like that. I think it's going to be the way of it is the way of the future. It's the way of the now, where people can actually tune in and hear people's opinions for 20, 30 minutes without being clickbaited. And to your point about the people out there that are that there's a fair few that popped up that I was somewhat supportive of early in the lockdown. But then I started to notice everything they're putting out is kind of the same, and it's just for clicks and it's just for shares and fight the power type stuff. And you're like, I'm starting to get second questions about you. I've definitely noticed that. I think that's a very valid point, because there is a fair few people that have figured that if I just share this point of view, I'm going to get shared and clicks and all that kind of stuff. And each to their own. If that's how they're making money, I don't agree with it, but they've got the right to do it. But we're the same. I'm not trying to put stuff out there that's clickbaity. We're trying to just have people, because there's no point even being clickbaity, right? Like if you say you have some stuff that's controversial that people love or hate, and then you get more listeners for one episode, you've got people listening to you that you probably don't want, not so much don't want, but that aren't there for the right reasons. They're not there for what you're building. They're there for the clickbait, new idea, Daily Mail type shit, and then they're going to leave anyway because they're not getting what they want. So
yeah, they yell at you later on. They say, "Oh, you used to be good when you did whatever. Now you don't." Yeah, that's true.
When you spoke about Kylie Minogue and all that, it used to be good. I used to love it. Now you're speaking about real world events, and I'm just getting depressed listening to it. So,
Bogues, it's like those dodgy NBA players who do car podcasts and have a go at Teslas all the time, when clearly Teslas are the superior vehicle in every way.
Oh, you wanted to get onto this, didn't you? Yeah, no, I don't mind Teslas. I don't mind them. I just think it's just more manly. The V8 and the exhaust, and you just how can you beat someone in a car race and they didn't even hear? It's just not right. It's not right at all. But
the cops don't notice you. That's what it is. You just soon pass. Yeah.
Oh, wait till we've got 20 million Teslas in Australia, and you all have to go for a charge at the same time. You might as well bring a tent. That might be a bit of an issue.
Yeah, so this is the reason why I raised the Tesla as a bit of a joke to have it got you, but also this point that you've just made. Like people on the left are like, you got to buy a Tesla. It's about the environment. I'm like, shut up. They're just better cars, in my opinion, right? Or for me, my life. But then the people on the right are like, ha ha ha, you've got to fill your powers coming from coal, and therefore Teslas are evil. Like, well, you're both wrong. Okay, like, why can't we be honest about what this is? This is, by and large, in Australia, emissions from a Tesla. There's the building of the Tesla, which happens overseas, but in terms of running it, you're just relocating your pollution. So instead of burning petrol in your tank and smoking up your garage with your little kids, I'm dislocating that to the AGL power plant 500 kilometers away. Personally, I think that's a good thing for my kids. Let's say it's the same amount of pollution, theoretically, in the running of it. I'd rather pollute it all in one source where it can be better controlled than have it in my garage and my kids sucking it in. So look, I don't think it's fair either way. People are saying Teslas are everything, others are saying they're rubbish. I think we need to be a bit more rational in this discussion, because clearly petrol is going to become a a collector's item, petrol cars.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, I'm worried about my small little collection. Like, am I even going to be able to fill them up to drive them? Is there going to be mechanics around to even work on them in 20 years? But yeah, to your point, I think that's a very fair point. I think the people that are extreme on either side are like, it's coming off the grid. Well, we're all polluting the same way. But then there's people that think because you're driving that, you're an elite green, you're not affecting the environment. Like, well, you actually are. Then on top of that, try to dispose of those batteries once they die.
Oh, that's a big problem.
That's a huge problem. So you got to have that open discussion, right? I don't think either of them are as bad as each other. I think they both pollute in their different ways. But it's gone so extreme on either side. And I feel like the reason why I give you shit about your Tesla, I think like the elitist intellectuals all drive Teslas, Matt, and they just sit above society in their quiet zooming cars and look at us, poor plebs like myself in a Holden Commodore that's gargling petrol and smells like fuel, and you get a little bit of oil stains on your hands when you drive it. That's kind of where I'm getting at with all that.
Hey, as we covered, I was an SS Commodore driver. I'm into all that, mate, and a Hayabusa driver, a rider. Hey, look, the biggest thing is that annoys me. Just an example, right? People go, "Oh, what do you do?" And your Tesla's broken down on the side of the road. You run out of electricity. I'm like, you dickhead. Your car runs out of petrol too, moron. Or they say, "Oh, look, a Tesla caught fire." I'm like, you idiot. Do you know how many petrol car fires there are? Like, we're all in this together, people. Okay, you like your petrol cars, Bogues. I think electric cars are more fun to drive, but we're all together. We both love cars, man. Like, let's be on the same team.
I still like them. Yeah, no, I still definitely. I think the innovation's amazing. How far they've come as well. I think it's sensational. I just like giving you a bit of shit for it. But yeah, it's just the extremes. It's the same as politics, left and right. You get it with the cars. It's like, I'm not driving that. And then you got even with autos and manuals, you have people punching on. It's like, you're driving your missus' car, the auto, and you're just like, no, I just don't, I can't be bothered changing gears today. Whereas, I've got my mate and I, like Justin, do the car chat where we're kind of the mindset of if you buy a sports car, it should be manual because you want to drive it and feel it, So it's like, then you got people that are like, nah, I want to drive the auto. The auto's faster anyway because it's a good box and you can't change as fast as the auto can. You're just like, all right, man, just chill out, dude. Like, it's not that important. But yeah, to your point, it's the extremes on both sides of the battery and the fuel stuff. And I think both sides have some great innovation. And yeah, I mean, just growing up with, I think for me, the fuel cars, I think it's nostalgic to an extent because my father had a workshop. I'd walk in, I'd see all these cars, all these Commodores. I'd smell the fuel and the oil. I think it's just that smell even brings back memories. You know what I mean? So I think that's a big part of it for me. Whereas, probably my kids will be the quiet, zoomy Tesla because that's what they grew up around, right?
Yep. Sad to say. Been an honor to be on your show, my friend.
Appreciate your time. Just a little bit over 2 hours, a nice long talk. I hope everyone enjoyed this. If you enjoyed it, give us some comments. Love to hear some feedback on our all our different rants. I think they're pretty informative at times, just our opinions on some things, and let us know where we got it wrong as well. Love to hear some feedback about where we got it wrong. That's usually where people start, Matt. They usually tell you what you got wrong and then what you got right. But thanks for the time, and I'll have to jump down to those new studios in Melbourne soon.
Cool. Love you, brother.
Thanks, mate.